their seats, we will start our work session so that we make sure we allot enough time and maximize the time that we have for this. For this,
today, and it looked like
Mike.
Festivities. Is this water or mine?
one was so fluffy.
Okay, so welcome to our work session, Mike.
Hey, old fogies,
guys,
we're going.
starting.
Sorry.
I'm like, geez,
They can't hear.
can they not hear?
No.
Even in the microphone?
Well, you have a gentle voice.
Do I have a gentle voice? I know my voice doesn't carry, so.
There you go.
And I do have a gavel, but I don't want to use it. That's my goal. So. Okay, thank you for being here, everybody. We appreciate your time. We are going to have a work session, so I'll open the meeting right now. The way that we'll run this is the way we run all of our work sessions. We'll do it less formally. You don't have to sign up to speak. If you would like to speak, please come to the podium, state your name. And then we have a hard stop for City Council. So just want to keep that in mind with everybody. During this work session meeting, the purpose of this is to understand your perspective and your history regarding Prop 5 and the enterprise funds for the power company. And we also want to be able to allow the council to discuss, because that's the purpose of a work session. So we will go ahead and invite whoever wants to speak first. Come on up. Yes. 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 Yep. Yeah, and this is why we wanted to handle it this way rather than during a formal council meeting, because we wanted to be able to give you the opportunity to get some feedback during the meeting. Okay, Lynn, thank you.
This is being recorded, though, Lynn, so don't swear.
This is being recorded.
Mayor and City Council, I appreciate the opportunity of addressing you this evening. First of all, Mayor Tammy Tron, thank you for meeting with us, you and Councilman Adams and Councilman Hunt. We really appreciate that. I was able to get some things discussed. We appreciate this opportunity of addressing this subject tonight. There are four of us, I think, are going to speak on this, so it's going to be quick. We really needed to be on the agenda because we have so much information to give you, having been through this all. I'm going to talk about the history of how Prop 5 came about. Susan Lee, a former City Council member, will discuss the financial ramifications. It's more complicated than you may think, more complicated than simply taking it from this pot to this pot. That's what brought Prop 5 about in the first place. And then Big Lewis will talk about the political fallout, politics behind all of this, what it means. Then Richard Lenz helped draft the legislation for this proposition. Let me give us some history on that. I'll go quickly as possible. According to Bill Sanders, our resident historian for Kaysville, it was the 1920s when the city first started the power company. And as with all good intentions, when government enters into the private enterprise field, they do so with lofty promises. We're going to, this is Bill's words, save you money, cheaper electricity. It never works out that way. It never has worked out that way when government involves itself in private enterprise. Companies can do a lot better with the profit incentive. In the 30 years that I have had my home, never once has the rates gone down. Never once have I got any rebates. Nothing like that. Always everything goes up. So being a good idea, no, it hasn't proved to be so. Over the years, the power fund just kept building up and building up and building up. And then it was in the 80s, and Dean Story would know better than I the exact day when the city began to take funds from the power fund excesses. Now, the problem with it, and the citizens found this out, the city they did this by grammar requests, and the city, they found out from these grammar requests that the city was taking the money illegally. And they had done this for years and years. Not only that, they had taken millions of dollars. In my figures that I went back over the years, it was $23 million the city took. That money was supposed to go for infrastructure and or reducing our rates. Never did. went into the city's general fund. The citizens asked the council to cease and desist us, follow the law. It's the law. You got to do it. And they refused. Unfortunately, what I've found over the years dealing with councils, you got two types of councils. You got those who represent the citizens and those who represent themselves or the city. I found that in my own council. And this particular council, I want to tell you, and I said this to Tammy and the others, in my view, this council has been the most outstanding in all of the councils I've had to deal with. And I judge the councils on one basis. Do you represent we, the citizens, which you're elected to do? You have stood behind us in this library building. You stood behind us in the fiber, and Mike, thank you. He's one of the ones who really pushed to put it on the ballot. I just shake my head at the amount of money that had been spent if that was passed. This council stood behind a group of citizens when they petitioned you on some zoning laws at a high school. So, much to my shock, is when I find you want to take away these basic rights. You see, the citizens put it on the ballot after they had gathered all the names. It went before the citizens and they voted 60 to 40%, or 56 to 44. So at that point it became law. And I will tell you this right now, that there were citizens, there were council members, at least one, I don't know about the administration, but the council member, because he told me personally, he said, we don't care if it passes or not. We're going to take the money anyway. And you know, I believed him. Because they'd done so many other crooked things, I believed him. And he said something else that was really chilling. He said, and besides that, we'll just pass an ordinance overturning it. And I believed him there. Thank goodness for the mayor. He stood up and said, no, it's the law and we're going to follow it. So both Mayor Hyatt and Mayor Witt supported the law. Mostly Mayor Witt. I questioned some of the taking of that money. But nonetheless, the law stood after it was passed. And so the law is a citizen's law. So what's disturbing to me is that if you overturn that law, if you modify that law, without the citizen's approval, you've taken away our rights, our constitutional rights. We have the right to pass laws. We don't just delegate it to you folks. We also have the right to do that, and we can do it through the initiatory process and pass it, and then it becomes law. And we urge you as a council to support the citizens. It's our right. We're the ones that set up the law. And if you can rationalize it all the way, you need the money, but trust me, we know all these things. We've heard all these things all before. We know all this stuff. That's why we passed Proposition 5. You open that door, it'll never close. You open that door, and it'll just continue. I'll guarantee if you want me to write it down, I'll do it. It will. So that's why we're appealing to you. Let me just put it this way. Let the sleeping dog lie, okay? Let the sleeping dog lie. Let it remain. We don't need to table this. Just let it lie as it was, as it's been for the last 10 years. Thank you.
Thanks, Len.
Thank you.
I'm not sure that anyone has any questions. No?
Yeah, that's,
Are we following this?
No.
Okay.
This is just additional information, right? The handouts?
Yeah, so,
It's fine, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something.
first of all, I'll introduce myself. I'm Susan Lee, and I am a former member of the City Council. Back in 2013, when I was running for the City Council, it was shortly after we had passed Prop 5. And we knew that Prop 5 was needed because the reserve fund showed that there wasn't hardly any money in it. And it wasn't until I was put on the council that Mayor Hyatt put me as an assignment over the power company. And with that, I went to the first training at Jackie with UAMPS, And when she noticed that I was from Kaysville, she came up to me and she said, "Do you mind meeting with me after the meeting?" And I was, yeah, sure. So after the meeting, we went into her office. There was another man there, and she told me, she said, "Do you understand UAMPS, how it works?" And I said, "Well, I'm not really. I'm just learning all this." I think there was like 22 cities that are involved with UAMPS. And with the cities that are involved, they're required to keep so much in reserves. And she said that according to the cities that have the reserve amounts, if there is a city that is lacking in their reserve funds, it brings the whole group down. It makes it harder for us to go in on projects and to be involved that way. Right now, Kaysville City is bringing the group down. And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, right now, Kaysville City should have at least over $7 million in the reserve fund. Right now, it's less than $1 million." I was shocked. I had no idea. So she gave me the information. I brought it back, sat down with Steve Hyatt, and it was at that time we put together the Power Commission. And with the Power Commission, we made sure that we had people that we put on it that were very well versed in accounting. So that it wasn't just specialists with the power company, but it was also people that could do the accounting portion of it. And we had some great minds on that council, on that commission that started. Currently, Alan Farnes, who is the chair on the commission, was also put on originally. He wasn't the chairman at that time, but he is now. And we were able to put together a chart and figure out a good price rate so that we could start to work to get that power fund back to health. And along with that, there was the sale of the property at the Smiths, where the Smiths currently is. Mm-hmm. And that property was bought with power fund money, so when it was sold, that money was put back into the power fund reserves, which only brought it up to about $4.5 million at the time. So we were still short. But through the years since then, obviously what was put together has worked. And it has made that fund healthy and whole. But I am telling you right now, if you change Prop 5 to allow the transfer of the funds, you're going to be opening up Pandora's box again. And there's no say on transferring too much of that money. It's the hardest thing in the world when government sees excess funds, so they say, and they'll want to use it. You're better off not opening that box, keeping things the way they are, and if the city needs funds, they should go after the funds like every city that doesn't have a power company, that doesn't have those reserve funds sitting there itching to be used up. So with all that I can tell you, I would ask, number one, don't table it tonight. Vote on it. Vote on it. But I'd like to see you vote it down and put a stop to this right here and now. Because I think this morning when Tammy was talking, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the general fund is the proper place that should be used to purchase things like fire trucks or anything for the city. And leave that power fund alone. Okay?
Thanks, Susan.
Good evening. My name is Richard Lenz. I'm a former resident of Kaysville. Some of you may know that. I ran for city council a couple of times. I wrote Prop 5. And for many years, when I was running for, the first time I was running for city council, which goes back about 13 years ago, I began to find out some information as to the properties that Smiths and other things that were going on down on Flint Street, and where this money came from. And when I discovered where it came from, I began to talk to citizens about it and how we thought that was somewhat improper that they do that. We are fortunate, I say we because I still feel Kaysville's home. But, you know, we're fortunate that we have a power company. To my knowledge, only Murray and us have power companies on the Wasatch Front. Could be more, it's the ones I remember. And, but to use these funds to take, especially after the citizens have voted on it, there's a whole difference here. Now, whether or not there's a state law that allows for you to do that or any other municipality, the citizens have voted on this. If you choose to overturn that and change the language of the law, you are literally breaking the law. I don't know any other way to put it. It is not your discretion to go against those whom you represent, in my opinion. Think about that very carefully before you do that. Because this is a law that was implemented by the citizens of Kaysville. If you change the verbiage so that you can use these as discretionary funds, you will be going against the exact thing that they were voting for and voting against. I would encourage you to think about that as you consider voting on this. This is not your city. It's everyone's city. And you need to represent everyone. And the best way to do that is to vote this down. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here and for providing some context to that. Briggs.
My name is Brig Lewis, and just before I start other things, I have to share something with you. It's a little lighter part of the world. A company was doing password audits on their employees. And they found this one clerical help that had the password. And their password was Mickey, Minnie, Pluto, Donald, Huey, Dewey, Louie, and Daffy, and Sacramento. And they said, why? And the clerical person said, you know, your instructions said 8 characters and a capital. So that's what they did.
That's funny.
They had never been hacked. Anyway, I've had a number of people that have expressed their concern about using the power fund to buy other things than power. And I agree with what has been said so far. In the process of all this, I'm going to throw in the middle, you each have a transcript from an article on the 26th of November that was in the Standard Examiner on city fiber cables. It was quite an interesting thing. And one of the cities that it mentions Kaysville, and it also mentions American Fork. And American Fork was our sister city that there was an interlocal agreement, and Kaysville managed to get out of that one. Otherwise, we would be helping American Fork pay a $9 million debt that they have incurred. So anyway, that's there for your perusal. I ought to mention too that I learned over the weekend that the FEMA had provided a grant to the CERT people to upgrade the repeater out on Antelope Island. And they said that the city had said that they either didn't use the money when they should have, or they didn't need, whatever. They said they've lost their grant and the city is using the money. The other thought is if the city needs money, in 2017, a road fee was added to our utility bill. And they implied that it was going to be strictly for roads. Weren't going to part of it, wasn't general fund, whatever, don't know. That road fee raises approximately $70,000 a month, $7.85. That turns out to be roughly $840,000 a year. And since they started that, Kaysville has reaped from this $4.5 million. And I see more potholes on the roads than I have in a long time. And it would be of interest to the citizens to know where that $4.5 million has gone. Has it been used for what it was intended to? If not, that's a slush fund that somebody could dip into. But I would just encourage that transparency should be the highest priority that we have. The power fund money and the general fund money should not be mixed in the same account or under the same ledger. If you move money from one to the other, there should be an entry for each time you move money back and forth.
Right.
So, but I'm a fan of transparency, and please be careful. You know, some of us older geezers, you're not old enough. Some of us, you know, we're living on fixed incomes. And it wasn't, last year they didn't, but 2 years ago they raised our Social Security, and then they also raised how much it was going to cost for Medicare and took it back.
Right.
So that didn't help a lot.
No.
Anyway, but yes, please consider that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you. Council, we have about 8 minutes-ish. Do you have any questions for anyone that's presented information and shared information with us? Any comments? Oh, go ahead, Councilmember Adams. You want to save it? Go ahead.
Make the comment, John. I mean, that's what we're
Yeah, it's a work session, so. I will mention just for anyone who might be listening, the action that Susan was referring to is on the action agenda as a possible ordinance change that corresponds with Proposition 5. So that's just to clarify that.
John,
I don't know, go ahead, Perry.
Well, if you have one, yeah, you go for it.
and I wrote down a couple of comments. And Susan, I appreciate your Pandora's box analogy, because I think of Congress and Social Security, and they've been dipping into that, and I'm just waiting for that to go dry. Mm-hmm. So I do appreciate that. I've heard, numerous emails and here today from a couple of different folks, saying that we would be breaking the law. My understanding is that's not true, from the lawyer, because we've asked our lawyer, we've talked to the General Counsel, League of Cities and Towns. They said this would not be breaking the law. Doesn't mean it's right, but it would not be breaking the law. And that's my understanding, and I thought I saw Nick, and he ran out when I was going to say something like that.
I can assure you that is not breaking the law. In fact, as a body, as a policy body, you make laws that govern our city. So. And that being said, and the transparency comment, we want to be totally transparent in whatever we do. We've had that conversation among ourselves.
Right.
We understand that we may be living with stigmas from past councils. We want to overcome that. We want to be as transparent as possible. And we probably got caught up with this early on and quicker than we should have, regardless of how that happened. And we put the brake on it. To be able to have these kind of conversations, and if it took us having to do this a couple more times, if that was the case, one of my biggest concerns and I did write down, where are the different city taxes actually been used for? I'd be careful what you ask for, because it might find out we need to increase the tax on roads, and I don't want to increase any tax myself, so because we do have some of those potholes, but I do believe they've been using those. But my one comment is, even if it's legal, is it right? And I think that's where
we as a council, in conjunction with residents of the city, need to determine. I also believe that as that pendulum swung, and I was probably just moving to Kaysville when a lot of these funds were being used previously, we know how pendulums swing. When there's backlash, it swings way far. Did it go too far? I don't know. I mean, I honestly don't know. Is it a place, and this will be a discussion where, as a council, and as we're, if something like this came up and we said, this might be a good place to do something like this, we have those conversations, and I don't know how they would occur other than in council meetings and work sessions. But did the pendulum swing too far? And that's the question I'm going in my mind. Yeah.
We have about 4 minutes, so just.
Sorry,
okay.
I talk too much.
So just real quick, I was just curious, how many of you have reached out to anybody on the Power Commission?
Yeah.
See,
Right,
that should
right.
have been, I think, one of the first places
agree.
you should have turned to and
I
got information from them, because they have a plan and they have an agenda for that money.
I will tell you, we have reached out to the power
Yeah, I've spoken
director.
with them.
And we've had conversations. So, but I understand the purpose of the Power Commission, and you're right. They also need to be included and consulted to get a recommendation either
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
But
Because my understanding is they're going to be submitting a rate increase. And so if you think there's excess funds sitting there, they don't, because they're going to be coming to you for a rate increase here pretty quick, because the wholesale for power right now is skyrocketing.
you're right, and we've had lots of meetings about that. So that's, thank you, Susan. Appreciate that.
And
Go ahead, we have 3 minutes.
Oh, and I've spoken with them, and we've also spoken with all the power folks to determine how much money in the reserves. And I think I can speak for the council in many of our discussions. We absolutely want to be transparent about this process. The fact that we're talking, the fact that you're here, this is a part of our government responsibility. And so just by talking about this and considering and circling back on this, in no way, shape, or form would we break the law, and could we break the law?
Right.
I mean, we don't have any interest in doing that. And my interest is I want a local government that is efficient with its money and transparent and open. We have lots of issues in this city, and when we look at all the numbers and what options we have, it does become very challenging. But it is a concern that we need to have a big pot of money in that fund for power. And so we absolutely, me personally, taking this very seriously and considering all aspects, everything you brought to our attention, all of our internal discussions and whatnot. So,
Thank you for that, Nick. Appreciate it, everyone. Do we need a motion to close this meeting, Nick? Okay. Will someone make a motion?
I'll make a motion
Okay.
that we close the work session.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We have 1 minute if anyone needs to grab anything. Yeah, you've got 1 minute.
59, 58.
Okay. All right, thank you for being here. I want to welcome you to our City Council meeting for Thursday, December 15th, 2022. The opening, I have the honor of providing the opening tonight, and just in doing so, I wanted to quickly mention some of the things we've been working on. This last week, we finished Kaysville City Gives. It was a huge effort. It was a huge fundraiser. It's the 6th year that the city has been involved in this. And I wanted to just to quickly give a quick shout out to some of the people that were instrumental in helping us. We were able to raise as a community about $75,000 to purchase toys and clothing and presents for children for over 120 plus families, as well as Safe Harbor, Mountain High, Davis Education Foundation, and children within Kaysville City. The helpers were Mindy Edstrom, who works for Kaysville City. Our Kaysville City volunteer director is Crystal Crane, and she was very instrumental, spent hours and hours and hours. Want to thank Lyndall Francis, who is the Youth City Council advisor. They participated on the Fill the Fire truck, and we want to also thank the Kaysville City Fire Department for sponsoring that event. And some helpers, Emily Murphy, Karen Dent, Genevieve Frazier, and Shanna Barker, along with everybody else. In addition, we have a couple of key businesses I just wanted to mention quickly. We wanted to thank Wasatch Soccer, Young Automotive Group, Reading Horizons, Gals Garage. Someone had a request for a wheelchair accessible desk, and so Skylar and Rachel Walker, who own Gals Garage, said, well, we can build that for them. So they built it. They built a beautiful desk for this family, and they were able to provide that for one of their children that is in a wheelchair. So it's really just a really neat effort. And most importantly, we want to thank the thousands of people who bought $2,000 worth of 2,000 gift tags from the Amazon wish list, as well as just the website that was created. And thank everybody. There's way too many people to thank. We don't even know who all of the donors were, but seriously, thank you, Kaysville City. That was an incredible effort. So I wanted to say that, and then I will provide an opening prayer, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance that I'll ask you to join me in. So, our dear Heavenly Father, we are grateful for this opportunity we have to come together as a city council and community to make decisions and take actions regarding our city. We are grateful for the responsibility and the privilege we have as servants of the city, and we ask you to please bless us with wisdom and discretion and compassion as we make decisions and lead out. We are grateful for the opportunity to celebrate Christmas in this holiday season, and we pray for the safety and well-being of our residents. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. Our first item of business is call to the public. And we don't have anyone signed up to speak, so we'll move on to presentations and awards. I'm really excited about the first award that I get to share. It's for Michaela Coulihan Clough. Her parents are here, I think, to accept the award in her behalf because she's out of town. I'm going to read the proclamation. I've known Kayla since she was a little girl, and she's an outstanding athlete. She's a professional soccer player. I remember as a kindergartner volunteering in the classroom. She's one of my kids' ages. Watching her outstanding athletic ability, she kicked the boys' tushes. She was just very, very good, very, very talented, and she's continued to be a talented and hardworking athlete, and she represents Kaysville. So I'll quickly read this. Whereas, as a young woman, Michaela Coulihan Clough spent hours on the soccer field, diligently refining her skills and building her character. Whereas, she played soccer for 4 years at Davis High, setting a Utah high school assist record twice as the school won the state championship for 3 years straight. Michaela was named the All-State First Team each year from 2014 to 2016. Whereas, Michaela played club soccer for La Roca Football Club for 7 years and captained the Olympic Development Program Region 4 team in 2015. Whereas, Michaela played 5 seasons of college soccer at BYU between 2017 and 2021, while also earning a degree in exercise and wellness. As a freshman, she registered to assist against Penn State in her Cougars debut. She ended her first year with 3 goals and 5 assists in 11 appearances and was named to the All-West Coast Conference freshman team. Whereas Michaela started all 19 games as a sophomore, where she totaled 5 goals and led the team with 7 assists as BYU claimed the West Coast Conference regular season title. At the end of the season, Clough was named to the 2018 All-WCC First Team, as well as the United States Soccer Coaches All-West Region First Team and All-American Second Team. Whereas on January 13th, 2021, she was selected in the second round, 14th overall, of the 2021 National Women's Soccer League draft by Orlando Pride, despite not declaring a rule change amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas she signed a 2-year contract with Orlando ahead of the 2022 season on January 26, 2022, she made her professional debut on March 19, 2022, starting in the season opener against Washington Spirit in the 2022 Challenge Cup. Whereas Kayla continues to uphold and sustain the Constitution of the United States of America, as demonstrated on the professional soccer field amongst her peers, by standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, through her demonstration of athletic ability and personal integrity, Michaela Coulihan Clough demonstrates the outstanding character and qualities valued and cherished by residents of Kaysville City. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Tamara Tran, Mayor of Kaysville City, along with the Kaysville City Council, hereby proclaim December 15th, 2022, as Michaela Coulihan Clough Day in the city of Kaysville. So we are so proud of her. She couldn't be here because she's a very busy woman, but her parents are here to accept her award, so please come on up.
They look too young.
I know.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you for being here. Okay. The next item on the agenda is presentation about Wasatch Integrated and Recycling. And I'm going to turn the time over to Nathan Rich. As a mayor, I get to sit on this board, and I'm really excited to be part of this. So take it away.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I appreciate the opportunity to come talk trash with I did come prepared with a PowerPoint presentation, if that's okay. Mm-hmm. And I know you have a long agenda, so I'll move pretty quick through this, but I'll stay as long as you have questions too. So if you have questions and want to stop me, please feel free. And then you can, that's how it always goes.
See if trash talking here will work.
So I also made a nice handout of the presentation so you could make notes as you went along. And of course, those are sitting safely on my desk.
Of course.
So you can trash them when you get back, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We'll make sure
Recycle,
of course. So again, I'm Nathan Rich, Executive Director of Wasatch Integrated Waste. And we'll go over quickly, talk a little bit about who the district is. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the district, and it's been a few years since I've been to Kaysville. And then just talk about our current status of the system, and then more importantly, and I think really the invitation has to do with, we've recently completed an update to our 20-year integrated waste management plan, so we'll talk a little bit about some things that we're going to be working on in the near future moving forward. So the Wasatch Integrated Waste is a special district. Much like the sewer district, we're owned by Davis County, Morgan County, and 15 cities within those counties that we serve. We handle about 340,000 tons of waste annually, and you can see that each person generates about a ton of waste. So currently about 73 employees, and I have the pleasure of a 19-member administrative control board on which Tammy serves. So we'll talk a little bit. I just want to briefly talk about integrated waste, because I mean, what are you talking about when we say integrated waste? And integrated waste is really, I look at it as pieces to a puzzle of how we want to best handle the waste that comes to us. This is the EPA's waste management hierarchy. The best way to handle waste is by not generating it in the first place, reduce it, reuse it, recycle, and then toward the bottom, least preferred methods of handling waste are a waste energy facility, which we operated for 30 years, and then a landfill being the least preferred, but interestingly is always the foundation. A well-run landfill is the foundation of any solid waste system, because there are always materials that are non-recyclable. We need to make sure that they're going into a landfill that's protective of the environment. The reason that is the least preferred from the EPA standpoint is because we're not taking advantage of, we're burying resources that could otherwise be used. So there's an environmental and an energy benefit to recycling rather than throwing things away. Integrated waste management, I like this picture, and you know, we talk about waste is local, and there's not a one-size-fits-all solution to solid waste management. Our waste is different in Davis County than it is in other parts of even the state, and particularly in the nation. This is an interesting picture. If you can pick out what might be different about this, this is a Davis County load of recyclables. And I'll point out the obvious. There's only 2 beer cans, and you got to look pretty closely at this. So when we design our recycling system, we have to understand that there's not as much aluminum in our waste as other communities. Other things that are very particular about Davis County waste is we have a lot of organic waste. A lot of people put their grass clippings in their garbage cans. We'll talk just a little bit about that. So what we're looking to do as an entity is figure out around the edges what things can we do that treat waste like a resource that we can do at a reasonable cost to improve the performance of our system. It has a lot to do with demographics, geography. The waste to energy facility was where it was because Hill Air Force Base was our natural customer for power for 30 years. Without laws and regulations, which we don't have in Utah, which is fine, it makes it a little more difficult to figure out how to, or we're not driven by regulation to do some things better with our waste. I am not going to read you our mission statement other than to point out that part of our mission is to recognize waste as a resource and also to make well-informed decisions based on science and to aggressively pursue best available technology as we decide what to do with our waste. So I'll only mention the waste to energy facility because it was a big part of our system for 30 years. It was really the linchpin of and why the district was created. So after 30 years of operation, that facility reached the end of its useful life, and we closed that facility in 2017. So our challenge after closing that facility is to look in other directions to do better things with our waste. One of our major responses to that was to build the Davis Material Recovery and Transfer Facility. This facility came online in June of 2020. And you can see on the left is the transfer station, and on the right in the background is the material recovery facility, and then in the front is our education and employees center. So I know a few of you have been on tours of the facility, so these will look familiar. The other pieces of our integrated waste management puzzle, the Davis landfill, our green waste and recycling and composting facility is our current largest area where we divert waste out of the landfill through the green waste. We have citizen drop-off and recycling opportunities where residents can come in and out of the landfill safely and without getting a flat tire. And we also operate household hazardous waste, electronic waste drop-off. We opened a thrift store a few years ago, which is really a great educational opportunity for people to see what we're doing with the waste that otherwise would be in the landfill. Another interesting and really big environmental piece of our program is our landfill gas to energy project, where we generate about 2.5 megawatts of power with gas, which is otherwise an environmental and potential risk to human health. So the system as it operates now, and I'll walk through these a little bit. The material recovery and transfer station, we're really pleased with the transfer facility. We are currently transferring all of the residential waste that comes to us. So it's about 1/3 of the waste that we handle gets transferred, and that material goes to the Tecoy landfill about 97 miles away from us. So the transfer station is working well. It's helping us extend the life of the Davis landfill, but there's a substantial cost to that. And with some of our recent increases in transportation costs related to fuel and some other escalation, we're at about $32 per ton after it goes into the long haul trailer. The other things about that facility, it is operating and we can pull saleable recyclable materials either from MSW, which we processed for a while, or again as we're processing mixed recyclables as they come from the curb. So just a reminder, the big five, cardboard, steel cans, aluminum cans, plastics #1 and plastics #2 are all being recycled and going back to market. We're actually getting paid for those materials. If it's not one of those and you think it's recyclable, we're still saying throw it in your bin, and we take the non-recyclable plastics, which are a lot of them, and the non-recyclable paper, which is pretty much all the paper other than cardboard in this current market, and we are able to generate an engineered fuel which goes to the Devil's Slide cement plant. They can't take as much material as we are making, but there's an opportunity for growth in that market. So it helps us divert or recycle more of the material that people are putting into their recycling cans. One of the big drivers of when we built the material recovery facility was the idea that we could divert the organic waste. So we screen the waste at 2 inches minus, and this is what it looks like in the summer. It's about 90% grass clippings. This material, we've been working with the anaerobic digester in North Salt Lake, and frankly, as it comes out of the facility, it's too rough for them to handle. So after some work, we had Jacobs Engineering do a study, and for the time being, we have paused that program, and we have stopped processing MSW because of we're not gaining the avoided cost of transferring this material. So if we were able to not transfer this material, it would help pay for the processing cost of the material. The landfill, we are currently life of the landfill, and this is another thing that was really important part of the solid waste management plan, is that facility has served us incredibly well over the years. It's helped subsidize a lot of the programs that we've provided. That facility has 18 years of life in it, and that's with us currently transferring 1/3 of the waste. So if we stop transferring any waste, we would be about 10 years life of that facility. So we know that when the landfill closes, there will be a substantial increase in the cost of service because it will all incur that additional $32 a ton transportation and disposal cost. The other thing we know is that we want to continue to provide the customer services that are at the landfill complex when the landfill reaches capacity. And we'll also need to build an additional transfer station at that landfill to handle that additional capacity. So the important thing is that we're in a good planning horizon for that. We'll want to be starting construction on that transfer station in about 15 years ahead of the closure of that landfill. So the integrated waste management plan, we did do a survey, and that plan is available on our website, and I'll have a link for that if you want to take a look at it. A couple of things we did learn in the survey, and there's a lot of information in there. One of them is that the services that we provide at the landfill are highly regarded by your residents. 94% of people either thought it was excellent or good services. So we know we want to continue to provide those services past the use of commercial use of the landfill. One of the questions we asked ourselves, how long do we want the landfill to last? How do we best use the material recovery facility, this incredible asset that we've built? And then what are the long-term economic consequences of those decisions? So we built financial models and looked at a lot of different options. So the recommendations coming out of the plan, number one is if we're not able to divert that organic material to the anaerobic digester, we should stop processing MSW. And we have done that, and that's at a substantial cost savings to the district. So that part has already been implemented. The second big really thing we talked about in the near term is we should look at implementing more robust curbside recycling programs in the rest of the district. So we're going to look at some numbers in a second. What I'm saying is we have the capacity at the material recovery facility to process commingled recyclables. If every city in the district had a program like Kaysville's program, we would have the ability to process that material. And that coupled with the green waste recycling program, we actually see pretty substantial diversion. We are planning on hiring 1 or 2 additional employees to help us with some educational outreach. Part of improving that program is to get better educational materials, more uniform, try to help. One of the biggest reasons people don't recycle is because they have a fear of putting the wrong thing in the recycling bin. And you have so many different recycling providers, so we want to help with that. We also want to have somebody who can reach out to cities and your other organizations and provide that. We're looking in the longer term. One potential low-hanging fruit to divert material from the landfill is construction and demolition waste, which is sticks and stones. A lot of that material is recyclable, and I think we're probably, this is midterm 5 to 7 year time frame, we'll be looking at constructing a construction and demolition waste transfer station recycling facility at the Davis landfill complex. And then expanding the green waste, curbside green waste collection as part of achieving higher diversions to transfer more material. So this was interesting. This is, and I apologize for the size of the type. It's almost readable. So we know as we really dug into this, if we're going to use existing programs to divert waste from the landfill, and it's not just about diverting waste from the landfill, we talk about that, but it's using that material to do something else that's beneficial. So we're not burying non-renewable resources. So if you look at Kaysville, you've got about 8,800 homes, so first cans, and in your commingled recycling program, where you have pretty good participation, you're getting about 13%, well, about 7% of your waste is being diverted into that blue can. This is really what's interesting. The green waste program, where about 50% of your residents have a green waste recycling can, and this is over a year's period, about 13% of the waste you generate goes into that green waste can, and that's recycled locally here at our composting program. So we know that your curbside program could use a little nudge, and we could do a little bit better there. We think that a really well implemented curbside recycling program should divert about 13 to 15% of the waste, and couple that with the green waste program, we should be nearing district-wide 20 to 25% diversion rates, and we think we can do that with some already existing programs. The question is, and as you look at the blank spots in this, is how do we encourage the cities that don't have curbside recycling programs, and there's about 5 of them, how do we encourage them to implement these programs? Because these are politically a little bit fraught, and there was a conversation had here about that. Shane, it was probably prior to you being here, but I know Mayor Hyatt implemented that program during that time frame. So one of the discussions that we're going to continue to have at the board are going to be how does the district incentivize cities to bring on curbside recycling programs? I will tell you one thing that we are talking about, and again, no decisions have been made here. We're having a conversation. One recommendation would be, and this also potentially helps controlling hauling costs, if the district stepped in and we took the entire district and broke it into 4 or 5 regions and then franchised hauling, there's a potential that we could see some cost savings on hauling because we're providing basically 3 or 4 large contracts rather than each of the 15 cities contracting individually for your waste management. Under that program, we would simply just add curbside recycling as part of the service and basically make that decision at the district level. I think that's going to be an interesting discussion, whether that's something that cities and city managers want to have control over or have the district control. Another option to make a curbside program to help offset the sting of rolling out a recycling program is the district helping pay for the bins that go on the ground. But that's a big one-time cost, and I'm not sure it's the best use of funds. Other options are just legislatively passing an ordinance at the district level that requires our member cities to implement programs. Another idea would be cities like Kaysville that generate 15% less waste maybe should pay 15% less than cities that generate 15% more waste. This is kind of a favorite of mine, but I don't know that it's getting any traction. So this is going to be a fun conversation over the next few months at the board level. So that's where we're headed. The plan is on our website under the news tab, and feel free to take a look at that. There's a lot of information in that. It's a really nice package. Don't be intimidated by the size, because about 40 pages of the 80 pages of that report are actually the telephone and web survey we did. But there's a lot of good information in there. So how'd I do?
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions, anyone? Oh,
I have one.
Shane, yes. Go ahead.
You can go first.
Nathan, thank you. Two quick things. What you mentioned tours.
Yes.
I don't think I've even taken a tour in my almost 7 years here. How do you advertise that? And I would love for the council to take a tour.
So 2 ways we do tours. You're going to send me an email or call me, and I will accommodate you anytime you like.
We'll pick a time that works for us, maybe, or something like that.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that would be
the other way we do tours is anybody, members of the public are welcome to call. We have tour guides. We tour about 4,000 school children a year through the facility, and so we're always happy to show somebody what we're doing and take them through the facility.
Sorry, one more real quick question. Do you have like a 30-second synopsis of why recycling is so challenging right now as opposed to what it was 10 years ago? Why the costs are so much higher for the cities to do this?
Yeah. So recycling is challenging because half of the recycling equation, right? Let me back up. The largest cost of a recycling program is the same thing. It's the largest cost of your solid waste program, and it's the cost to run the pickup. It's the cost of the bin. 2/3 of your solid waste dollar gets spent on the hauler picking up the material and hauling it to us. What makes recycling challenging is that the back half for us, there's a cost to process the material, and we recoup a portion of that material of that cost through the sale of the recyclable materials. But it's a market, and like any market, it goes up and down. 9 months ago, we were in a great position. Right now, the markets are pretty dismal. In fact, a month ago, cardboard, we couldn't move cardboard. It was worth less than zero because here, it's not just what the cost of or the price for the material it is, it's the cost to transport it to the processor. So we're fortunate steel, we only have to take up to Nucor steel, and they recycle that. Most of the paper goes to the Pacific Northwest, and the plastics go to either the West Coast or the East Coast, so we have to cover the cost of transportation as well. And then it's really the whole idea about, the perception of recycling, and a lot of people think, well, you're selling the material, recycling should be free. So it's getting people to understand that the reason we're recycling is really to make sure that we're recapturing those renewable resources, that we shouldn't be taking all this stuff and just throwing it in our garbage can and kicking dirt over the top of it. So that's a challenge.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Nathan. Nate.
Yeah. Appreciate your presentation, and I've never met a Nathan I didn't like, so pleasure to meet you.
So noted.
So, yeah, a couple quick questions. Very pleased with Kaysville with our 20%. I would love to see that bumped up.
Yeah.
So that's
Woods
fantastic.
Cross is the one to chase.
Yeah, so we're gonna come after you, Woods Cross. Okay, a few quick questions. You mentioned Davis landfill has 18 years left.
Yeah.
Okay, that's kind of startling.
Right?
Is there any, with all of your projections, all the numbers you've looked at, is there anything that we can do collectively as communities to extend that life?
So when I came to work for the district 22 years ago, we had 20 years of life in the Davis landfill. And that's when we were handling about a third of the waste that we're handling now. So the answer is, from an engineering standpoint, I don't have another rabbit I can pull out of my hat. The facility can't be expanded beyond the footprint of our first permit because it would be considered a lateral expansion, and the facility does not meet modern EPA siting criteria. We're too close to the Air Force, we're too close to homes. So the answer is, we can't do much more in terms of engineering around the facility. So diverting waste is part of it. Recycling program helps a little bit, but we're so close to the end of the life of the landfill that even if we were diverting 25% of our waste through a recycling program, it would only add about 4 years to the life of the landfill.
Okay.
So you have to think of it from this standpoint. It's not just the Davis landfill that if we do some diversion programs, and green waste is a great one, it's also extending the life of or avoiding the cost of handling and transferring that waste to a regional landfill. So honestly, there's not a lot we can do about the end of that life other than plan for it coming, right? We know it's coming. We know that we want to build a transfer station. Really the only practical way we can extend the life of that landfill is to transfer more waste now. And that is one thing that we looked at, and in the plan we looked at limiting how much waste goes into the landfill. We have to transfer more waste now, and that does help even out rates, and we'll do a little bit of that as basically budgets allow, but there's a cost to do that, so it's pay now, pay later.
Oh, well, that's good to know. I appreciate your
I think the real key
insight on that.
is planning for the closure and making sure that we're ready for it and we don't drive off a cliff when we get there.
And you mentioned one possibility is moving to a district, and I always get a little bit concerned because it kind of takes power away from the city with pricing and things like that. And so I'd love to look into that more and talk to you at another time more into that. And then one quick question too. I have to admit I'm one of those. I'm constantly hesitating when I put stuff in the recycle can because I don't know if it should go in there or not. What do you see most of at the landfill in those recycling cans that you can't recycle? Is there something that would help all those listening to?
Yeah. Well, I'm actually going to push the other way on
Water
that.
bottles, put everything in.
Even in cities that have recycling programs, when we were processing MSW, recovering substantial quantities of recyclable material. So I'm going to tell you, err on the side of put it in your recycling bin, and don't put those aluminum cans, don't put cardboard, the plastics number 1 and 2 in your garbage can, right? I really want to encourage you. Now, a lot of people won't tell you that because most material recovery facilities are operated by private entities, and they want as little contamination as possible. So they only want the high value recyclable things. I would say if it's plastic and has that Chasing Arrows recycling symbol on the bottom, put it in. Right now, plastics number 5, which are yogurt containers, your cottage cheese containers, a lot of food comes in those. We are not recycling those because there's currently not a market for those. But the equipment we have installed has the ability, we can tell it, start removing that. And that market looks like it's an emerging market that might come. And I don't want to retrain even with these new outreach folks we're going to have, it's just really hard to retrain people. So if it's clean paper, if it's clean plastic, go ahead and put it in the can and we'll figure it out. If it's clean, most of that can be used for engineered fuel. Right now, they're not taking all of that, but we are hopeful that if you make a mistake, boom, the energy will still be recovered from that.
That's great. Hey, thank you so much.
Okay, long answer, I tend to do that.
Thank you, Nathan. Anyone
Okay.
else? Thank you. Appreciate your presentation.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we are on 3C. I'm going to turn the time over to Aaron Hickson for the presentation of our annual fiscal year 2022 audit. I know you've been here and you've been working hard. So,
thank you, Mayor and members of council. Yes, I represent my firm, HBME LLC, and we were engaged to perform the annual audit for the year ended June 30th, 2022. And I wanted to go over some highlights first before we go into the numbers, because I really feel like these highlights make the numbers make sense. This year there were some different things that occurred that make the numbers comparison over last year unusual without this information. First, there were 2 funds that were changed. A few years ago, a fund for road funds was set up when the utility fee or the fee was assessed for transportation. And at that time, based on an analysis and research, the city felt that it was in its best interest to create an enterprise or a business fund for this in full transparency. As the dust settled and things kind of fell out, it was better to be presented as a governmental fund, and so this year that happened. What happened because of that is $63 million of assets were transferred from a business type to a governmental fund.
can I pause you for just 1 second?
Absolutely.
Sorry, Shane, do we have IT around? Our monitors don't work. It would just be easier for us to be able to refer to this if we could see, but, okay, continue. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem at all. And so when we look at it, it's going to look like your business type lost $63 million revenue and your governmental funds earned $63 million of revenue. That isn't true.
Okay.
It's just as it's presented. And so you'll see here in this chart here on 22, that if you look at the total columns on the far right, there's a year-over-year comparison that makes sense. But when you look at the business type and the governmental activities, you'll see assets, capital assets, that second line. In 2021, business type had $115 million of assets, and then in 2022 it went way down, and then the reverse. Oh, that's fun. I did.
That was quick.
Yeah. All right, and then you'll see the reverse happens in the governmental activities, and so when you're looking at these in more in depth, just understand that change happened. Also, I wanted to let you know that management felt that it was in the best interest of the ambulance fund to be combined with public safety instead of having its own enterprise or business type fund. And so it is now part of the fire department in its presentation within the general fund. And then finally, as you all, I'm sure, are aware, ARPA funds from the federal government came in, and the city was awarded both from state sources and federal sources $4.8 million of ARPA funds. Those have been assigned for the fiber project. So that being said, if technology isn't our friend right now, I can just keep talking and then you can refer to this. I wanted to talk high level about the operations. If you can go to page, I believe it's 39.
In our packet.
It's the cash flow statement for the proprietary funds.
Page 39, I've got it up.
So this first section here is the operating activities for your enterprise funds. And I just wanted to bring this up because you can see you have water, electric, stormwater, road, ambulance, and then a few other non-major funds. All of them are operating at a positive operating cash flow, and that's a good thing.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Would you like a laser? Because I'm having a hard time kind of following quickly enough as you speak.
Absolutely.
Do we have an extra one? This one's not working.
I don't use lasers very often, so I'm assuming.
So close your eyes.
All right, so right here, this section is the operating cash flows. So this tells you your cash flow for the operating for these utility funds. Mm-hmm. All of them have been operating at a positive cash flow, and that's really good, except for ambulance. You can see there, it's being rolled into a governmental activity, and that I feel is the most appropriate. I want to commend both the council and management for doing a fee analysis regularly for these enterprise funds. That is necessary and recommended even at the state auditor's office level, because when you charge a fee to any citizen, you want to make sure that it's a fee that makes sense, right, and that it's intended to recoup certain fees or incur the costs for whatever it may be, water,
but directly
road
related,
transportation,
right,
et cetera. And then overall, you can see, and not on this chart, we're done here, but I want you to just know that assets increased, liabilities decreased year over year. And so operationally, the city is doing well. I think all of your departments are very fiscally responsible. They manage their budgets, and most of what I do, and I'll now move into this side of it, is when I come, I need to look at the internal control environment of any organization. Mm-hmm. And when I come here and look at the internal control environment of Kaysville City, I'm impressed. Like I said, each department head, it's important to them. It's important that things flow the way they should, and that the policies that are in place are actually functioning as designed. That being said, when you deal with humans, you deal with human error. 99% of what I see is a result of human error. And so with that, we will check against various policies and procedures at the federal level and the state level and even at the city level, and making sure that they are complied with. Most often, we see an exception here and there, and we are required at the state level to inform you of even one instance. Right. We do not get to have a materiality threshold. The risk in this is that if we tell you that something was done 5,000 times, and then we come and give you a finding because one time it didn't happen, the propensity is we have a problem here because you're writing it and you're standing in front of us telling us that we have a finding. I don't want to minimize the fact that there is a finding, but I also want to make sure that you understand there are 3 findings that I'm now going to discuss. Each of them, I would say, are minor. And if we did have a materiality threshold, these would just be verbal comments where we would say, here's an area where you can improve, and it would have stayed at the management level. But we are required by state law to discuss them with you. So we will go to the end, and that is on page 133. And that's not even the last page, so this is a great, fun document.
We know. And I'll just say, while you're going there, I think it's good that you have findings. I mean, that, to me, that's the biggest concern with this has always been that we hire somebody to do an audit, and obviously you want us to continue to hire you, and so it's almost like we're your client. But at the same time, we don't want you to just, be cherry or, I mean,
Right, we want to know
we
how
wanna know.
we can improve.
So
Yes.
this is good. We're not mad that you found things.
Okay.
Right.
A couple people are going to get fired, but whatever.
And my concern is that anytime you have a finding, there's a little egg on your face.
Right.
And I don't want it to represent as a negative that is unduly placed on somebody. Again, when you deal with humans, you deal with human error. Human error is different than fraud.
Thank you for that distinction, because that's very true. Okay, what are they?
All right, so you'll see here in the middle of this page are the areas that the state auditor's office wants us to look at. And so each of these areas are where we did our procedures during the year. They will separate these and say, we want you to look at this every year, and then we want you to look at some things every 3 years. And so if you'll go to the schedule of findings on page 136, that's the first finding. All right, so finding 2022-1, fund balance compliance. This is kind of like a good finding, I guess, if you were to say that.
We're familiar with this finding, right, Mike?
So state law says that your general fund, certain portions of your equity cannot exceed 35%.
Right.
At the end of the year, ish, the UDOT came and said, we're going to purchase some land. And you didn't get to choose whether you were going to sell it. They bought it. Proceeds from that sale were in excess of $1 million. Those funds came in at a point where it did not make, or they were not able to make sure that they were transferred into where they needed to be. And so with that sale, you went to 35.93%.
Right.
Without that, you can see the cause. I put a statement there that said, without this transaction, the calculated percentage would be 32.4. Again, this is kind of, you want to make sure that you are complying with this, because you don't want to have too much funds, but you also want to have enough for a rainy day, just in case economic downturn, etc. Heaven forbid another COVID-19-esque situation. And so that finding, the management's response to this, I agree with, and they're just going to transfer it to the Capital Projects Fund, and it goes away. So you are likely not to hear anything from the State Auditor's Office on this. So that's the first one. The second finding is on the next page. And state law requires that your expenses, your appropriated expenses should be less than your actual expenses should not exceed your appropriated expenses. And so in these two funds, or departments, excuse me, the general fund and capital outlay, and then the road fund in just general, there was an over budget of $128,000 and then $90,000. Again, the management's response is great, and it's just they will make sure that they are watching the budget and that these funds are budgeted for, and then amendments will occur as they need to. And then finally, on the last page, a couple of years ago, the State Auditor's Office came out with a fraud risk assessment that they required every municipality and local government in the state of Utah to conduct. And there were a lot of questionnaires just to assess the internal control environment of each entity. That was required to be completed and sent to the State Auditor's Office But also, it was required that that be presented in a public meeting every single year.
Right.
I read the state audit compliance guide, and it is not clear that that second step occur. And so I had to call them and say, are they required to present it in a public meeting every year, or just update it and submit it? And we were told that it needed to be every single year. And I said, just so you know, your audit compliance guide does not clearly state that. So therefore, this last finding is a one where now that everybody knows, it's going to happen. So you'll see this each year, where the results of this assessment will be presented to you, and then you'll be able to comment on that as you feel appropriate.
Right.
So that is the results. I want you to say overall, even though we focused the last part on these three findings, overall I'm very impressed with the city and the employees and their expectation for doing well and complying with policies. And I'm willing to answer any questions that any of you have.
Well, I was just going to say I appreciate the time that you've taken to do this. I know it's taken a lot of time. But so really the remedy for these findings, threefold. First of all, the public hearing regarding the last one that you mentioned has to happen on an annual basis, and now we know that we've got clarification. And then on the other two, it was a matter of a transfer not happening.
So the first one,
Explain that.
UDOT bought that land.
Right.
Those proceeds came in at a point where it was just...
We couldn't do anything yet with it. Right.
It was not a pervasive issue. It was very isolated. And so it's kind of like, how do you prevent something like that from happening? Well,
Right.
just don't let UDOT buy your land again. I mean, it's really
Right.
hard. And so...
Can we specify which land that is for all those watching?
That was up by the water tank.
Yeah.
Okay, along Highway 89?
Yeah,
Okay.
up by Highway 89, yes. Where exactly, I'm not sure, but that's the...
All along, they were gonna.
Right.
Only a million?
All,
Originally, they were not going to buy it, and so that's where it kind of was last
It
minute
was
that
back
they
and
decided
forth.
they were going to buy it rather than actually they were going to lease it. We were going to have to maintain it, and so it was
And
kind
then
of
the
a
third
last
one
minute deal.
was,
And then third one, there's two departments had, they were over budget in
Okay.
their expenditures in the road fund and then in the capital outlay for the general fund.
okay.
And so that's just going to be an increased effort to make sure that that's monitored. So throughout the year, you'll do budget amendments.
Right, so we should have had a budget amendment to address that prior to the audit. Okay,
So-
Yeah, that's
got
all.
it.
So Mayor, in your and my world, that's called Nunn-McCurdy breach.
Right,
So that-
Right.
Which is not good.
right, yes. Thank you. Okay, council, do we have any questions? No? Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Takes us to conflicts of interest. Council, do we have anything to declare? Conflicts of interest? No? Okay, sounds good. Consent items. Does someone want to make a motion to approve the consent items, which is the approval of the minutes from November 17th, 2022?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from November 17th of 2022.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. We'll start at this end. Councilmember Jackson.
Aye.
Can we go this way?
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. Thought I'd shake it up a
You're
little
going
bit.
to confuse us.
Just shake it up a little bit. Okay, thank you for that. All right. Okay, let's move to 6A.
Mayor,
Yes,
before we move to the action items, I was wondering if I could make a motion to move action item D to the top of the list there so that we address it first.
okay, you sure can. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Councilmember Hunt.
Aye.
Councilmember Adams.
Aye. Sorry.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye, Karen.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes. Thank you, Councilmember Jackson. Didn't mean to miss you. All right, so we'll move 6D to 6A and then just move everything else down. So the first action item will be to address an ordinance amending Kaysville City Ordinance 4-2-7, electric revenues and rates regarding electric fund transfers. Okay, we've had prior discussion about this. We had a work meeting talking about this, and I guess I'll turn the time over to Nick, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share regarding this?
Mayor, I don't have any further information I think I need to present.
Okay.
This is the same ordinance amendments that we presented at work as a work item last meeting. We're happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sure, Councilmember.
So I have a question for you. Can you talk a little bit about the legal aspects of this? Because we've heard from a lot of folks about that, and I just want to make sure we are all clear, just kind of on the record.
Just sort of a summary recap legally
Yeah, summary.
speaking?
Yeah, that'd be
Okay.
nice. I guess there was some concern that we would be breaking a law by considering this or doing it and whatnot, and so.
Yeah, because it was passed by proposition.
Yeah, a little recap might be helpful.
So I wasn't here for most of this, but I believe in 2013, based on some fund transfers, the citizenry of Kaysville City passed Proposition 5, which is the current version of Kaysville City Code 4-2-7, which restricts fund transfers out of the power department. It is legal to change ordinances that are passed by proposition. Several years ago, the citizens of the state of Utah filed a proposition for medical marijuana issues, and the state legislature took that and changed it. So there's nothing illegal about amending the ordinance after it's been codified. It exists just like any other ordinance, which you can change and alter and amend, repeal at any point. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions regarding that? Just for anyone who's listening, this was the ordinance that supported Proposition 5, disallowing Kaysville City to transfer money from the power fund into the general fund for anything other than administrative types of costs and fees. So, okay, so go ahead.
Can I
Did you have-
ask a question?
Yes.
So we had talked in previous council meetings about, I believe some research was going to be done to find out how many cities in the state have their own power companies and how many of them, what percentage transfer money from the power to the, I'll say the general fund.
Before we go
Okay.
there, just point of order really fast. We don't have anyone signed up to
Oh,
speak to this, so
yeah.
I just wanted to make people aware of that. Go ahead. Thank you. Shane?
Mayor, I probably don't have as much information as I'd like at this point, but we did reach out to all the UAMPS members. I think there's 33 members of UAMPS, and just mention how many of them transferred funds. And of course, it spanned the gamut from transferring quite a bit of money to transferring no money. There was only 2 of maybe, and I'm sorry, I can look at this while we're talking, tell you exactly how many responded, but I think I had about 10 people respond so far, and 2 of those do not transfer at all. The other 8 transfer as much as $4 million was the most I received from their power fund to their general fund, and there are some that do it some of them have a policy that would guide how they do it and when and why, and they take it year by year, and some just do a blanket percentage. So, but I think the vast majority, it's fair to say, do some transfer of some sort.
May I have a follow-on question?
Yes, absolutely.
So then let me form the question properly. Are there stipulations that are put in place by cities that, and this, I'm asking something you may or may not know, that allow for public discourse or are restricted to what funds might be used for, instead of being willy-nilly, which the perception I have, and perception is reality, that's what, is that that may have been what was done here in the past, that there were not controls over it. Is that
You
understand my question?
And you tell me if I didn't answer correctly.
Yeah.
We do have requirements that we have to meet in order to make these transfers. We meet these requirements now because, like the mayor just said, we are able to transfer administrative costs to a portion of my salary is paid for by the power company because I do power company related activities. It's a direct benefit to the power company. So those transfers are done, and we do have to notice them a certain way. There's a public hearing regarding transfers. We have this, I think there's a mailer that we have to send. So all of those things are done, and we would do something very similar in this case to meet that threshold. I think some of you have mentioned that you would like to, if we did continue down this road, to do something above and beyond that. If you are going to transfer more than just the direct operations for the power company, you could do something where you say, we're going to do another $1 million and it's going to go to X, Y, and Z. But that is not required of us at this time.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Well, and for anyone who's in the audience or listening, I think we have two discussions here. First of all, there's the discussion of, can it be done? Yes, it can be done. There is a process required to do it. The second question, and really an important question, is should we do it? Proposition 5 was about 9 years ago, I think, and it did pass, and it was a ballot initiative that disallowed Kaysville from doing that for many reasons. And so that's kind of the discussion that we were having. So over the last probably 6 months, we've talked about maybe doing this for many reasons because of the recession and the economy, and we're thinking it's, if we have any reserves, should we use them? We haven't taken money from the power company. We haven't done any transfers yet, but we've had lots of discussions, and that's why we're here. So the item on the agenda is not necessarily to take power funds or not, but it's to change our ordinance or not. And so that's what's before us, and that's the decision that we have to make. The reason that it's on the agenda now is because we discussed it last council meeting, and we wanted to move it to an action item. So that being said, does anyone have any other comments about that?
I have a lot of comments and I want to go over it and why I would choose to do this, but it's going to take more than just a minute or two, so I want to be able to have some time. But if somebody's just got some quick questions, that's fine.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a point of clarification. So when this, when it passed, I know there was discussion of residents obtaining funds back to them if there was an excess of funds. And I think I heard, in speaking to a few folks, reading all the emails, that there were some promises, and I could be wrong on this, but that people could get up to $500 back at the end of the year, potentially at the time. And maybe that was used to help people understand.
Proposition was being discussed. Is that what you mean? That was kind of a part of it.
And I looked into it.
Okay.
I haven't found any instances where any other power entities or companies have reimbursed folks, and I'm just curious if we have more information on that in the research we've done, because I know that was brought up quite a bit in the emails.
In terms of, has Kaysville ever done it?
No, not if Kaysville's ever done it, but if that's a real possibility, because I was a little bit concerned about the logistics of that, and it changes year to year.
Right.
How much excess money is in there. And I did a bunch of research, and I couldn't find any instances where any other power entities actually did that. And so I just wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit. And maybe it's not so much of a question, just
kind of a general statement
that we can talk about. But.
Well, in talking to our accountants and the way that we operate our business, you might have a general monthly operating costs. And from the operations level, looking at it just operationally, there's a discussion about raising power rates, like Susan mentioned in our previous meeting, because power is becoming more expensive. So they're really two separate funds. We've got an operating fund, which handles, the monthly operations expenses and cash flows, and then we have the surplus, the savings that is accrued over time. And I think last council meeting we looked at how much has gone into the fund over the last couple of years, and it's not consistent. We can't always count on a certain amount being saved, having a surplus, and so it just depends on the economy and what is needed to be purchased. And so just because we might have money in savings per se, doesn't mean that that money can be refunded, because the operating costs haven't changed, is my understanding of that. And so I wanted to, does that answer, does that kind of address that? Okay, all right. Any other questions? We can do comments as well. We don't have to, I mean.
I guess a question,
usually,
sorry.
yes.
Do we have those exact numbers of how much is in the power fund?
A little over 9 million.
It's like 9.2.
Yeah.
9.2 million, and then in speaking, from my understanding, we wanted to keep 7 million, no less than, is it 8 million?
8.
No less than 8 million in that. And so, I mean, that, from the get-go, that's been a very clear part of our discussion, that whatever happens, it's a concern of mine that's followed, and that the city can't dip in or pull money from that below that limit. And so I think it's important to know the exact numbers and whatnot, so.
Thank you. That makes sense. Anyone else? And generally, our process is we have questions in the beginning, then we have a motion, and then we have comments. So we've turned it into a discussion because we want to hear from everybody on council. And so this is the time that we'll discuss, and then we'll have a motion, and then we'll have comments before we take a vote. So, council members, any other discussion points? You go ahead, Abby, or whatever you'd like to say.
If that's okay with
Sure.
Councilmember Blackham and you.
Yeah.
I guess I just have, since our last meeting, I mean, I think it's fair to say that we never know what our blind spots are. And, you know, you don't know what to ask until you know what to ask. And as far as this agenda item goes, for me, there are still too many unanswered questions. I would love to still hear from the Power Commission. I know we've talked with Brian, but I'd love to hear with the Power Commission. I would really love if we could get more concrete data on power outages from, hopefully when we implement the new power system that we approve them to be able to buy, that'll give us more up-to-date information. And I guess with the Power Commission speaking about their information on raising rates, and I'm not sure if those are questions we can answer right now. I would assume not. But if anyone has the answer to those, I mean, I guess no one will have the answer from the software because we haven't gotten it yet. But those are some things where I think more information might be warranted.
Thank you.
That's all I had.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I
Councilmember
could
Blackham.
go, but first of all, I take the budget very serious in Kaysville City because I feel like as a council, that's our #1 priority is to do the budget. And I look at the power company as owned by the citizens of Kaysville City. And I say that when they took on the responsibility and the ability to own and operate that power company, they were taking on part of a corporation or a business that they were hoping would be profitable, would make money, and would also provide rates at a reasonable, equal, or reduced amount. And we've got data that says we're right there with our rates. Our rates are probably lower than most other power companies that are owned by the citizens. And with Rocky Mountain Power, we're actually right there with them. Some of the time of the year, our rates are actually lower. Some of the time of the year, theirs are a little higher, or ours are a little higher. So I look at this and I say, okay, maybe Kaysville's got a spending problem. I don't know. But last year when we did the budget, we were about $1 million short. I don't like the answer to always be, let's just raise taxes. Because we didn't raise taxes in Kaysville last year. My taxes, my property taxes, my own went up $500 last year. But Kaysville City didn't raise theirs, but a lot of other people must have because mine did alone. And I feel like you take a power company, we own this power company, and I don't want us to take the money from the power company if it's going to hurt the power company. But I look at the reliability index that we've gotten over the last couple of years, and I've got one here for the last 20 years, but just the last 2 years, we've been 99.998 and 99.993 of a reliable power, and it's never dropped below 99 in the last 10 years. It got down to 99.7 2 of the last 20 years. So as far as reliability, we have a pretty reliable power system. Granted, there are things that need to be done. It needs to be upgraded, and we are doing that. We are constantly doing that. And Briggs said something earlier, I'm on a fixed income. I look at that, I say, there's a lot of people on a fixed income. They're on a budget. They're on a budget at home. And when they're on a budget, they've budgeted for their power. The fact that our power company has been able to build up its reserves, I say let's take that money, some of that money, at least provide that tool in our toolbox that we can, and reinvest in our community. Let's take our money that we've put into that power company and reinvest in our community, and let's just quit saying every time we need money, let's just raise taxes. Because when you do one-time expenditures and one-time purchases, if you have extra money, and you can put it and reinvest it in your community as part of your community. And I believe that power company funds, now I think there was some mistakes made. I think trying to take power company funds and put it towards something that you have to pay for annually, that's a mistake. But if you can take excess money, if it's there sometimes, and help lighten those one-time purchases when you're short in your budget, so you don't have to raise taxes, so that people like Briggs or whoever's on a fixed income, they have already budgeted for that power. But if we do a tax increase, they haven't budgeted for that. That's money, and I have a hard time telling Briggs, I'm going to raise your taxes, but yet I have a reserve of money over here. It's your money. You put it into. It's part of what you own as Kaysville City. I want to be able to reinvest that money. And the state has made it so difficult for us to do this. In order to transfer enterprise funds, we have to hold a completely separate public hearing. We have to say where those enterprise funds are going. They're going to go from one account to another account. I think it even says that we have to be fairly specific on what we're going to spend it on, whether it be a portion of a fire truck or a portion of a park or maybe a new road grader or something that we need that's a one-time purchase that I don't want to have to raise taxes for, that you're going to have to pay every year for. And that's never going to come. You're never going to reduce your taxes. But there might be some years, and the difference is when we're equal in power costs, let's say Rocky Mountain Power, and they make $10 million in profit, their ratepayers don't see any of it. It just goes into the corporation, it goes into the people who own it, it goes into their pocket, and it's their profits. The difference is, if there is profit to be made from Kaysville Power, let's reinvest it in our community. Let's not keep raising taxes. Let's not have our answer be, let's just raise taxes. I'm one of those people that don't think you should raise taxes every year to keep up with inflation. I'm one of those people that think if there's money out there that's all of our money in the big bucket and we can figure out how to use it, let's do it. And the only thing we're doing tonight with this ordinance is saying this ordinance allows us to do that. Title VI, is the Utah Code annotated. It's was effective July 1st, 2021. It's 10.6.135.5. Gives cities the ability to transfer enterprise funds. It has a very, very specific route of how you have to do that. And you read that and it says you have to have public notice. You have to have different public hearings. All we're doing tonight is trying to put that tool into our toolbox to say, we do have the ability to use this if we need to. If we don't need to, great. But to me, the answer is not just keep raising taxes. And I don't know how many times we've raised taxes since Prop 5 has come in, but it's a lot more, it seems like to me, than before Prop 5 was there. And we were taking that money, if it was excess, And we probably took too much. I'm not saying we didn't take too much. Maybe it got too easy. But you can build the power company to where they could buy brand new trucks every year. They could do this every year. They could put poles every year. I mean, we could be replacing things. But according to this, our outage studies and how well we're doing, I don't know how you get better than 99.99%. I guess you can get 100%, but there's going to be an equipment failure somewhere. Our company's reliable. If we do have the excess money, let's never say never. If we have the ability to use money that we have in another account somewhere and we can transfer it so that we don't constantly have to raise taxes every year, let's do it. Let's use that tool. Let's reinvest in our community. That's what I see it as. I see it as a reinvestment into Kaysville City. Yes, we probably should be more restricted on what we use it for. I think this outline here, if we decide to do that, you can come in and say, I agree or disagree with what you're doing with that money. And all we're asking with this ordinance is just a clarification and another tool in that big city bucket, that budget, which is what we do, which is probably our very most important job that we do, is monitoring the budget of the city.
Thank you, Councilmember Blackham. Does anyone else? Councilmember
Yeah, I'd like to say a few things. I appreciate your comments, Councilmember Blackham. I feel much of the same way, but I've been very cautious in approaching this, and like Councilmember Hunt said, we don't know what we don't know, or our blind spots, and so your activism and your emails, it's been really helpful for me to read through that and read the back and forth exchanges between Shane and some of the other council members and mayor. And so with that being said, we talked about back in the 80s and many years ago, 10 years ago, when the power funds didn't have a large reserve and they were hurting the other neighboring communities. But now we've reached a point where we have very healthy reserves in the power funds. Now, as a resident of the city, what we're doing here tonight, this is responsible government. Talking about it, this is about policy. I think I had an email where someone referred to an Old Testament adulterous situation and comparing this to that. And that's a little much because I think working with my colleagues, we are taking this seriously, and we've spent so much time looking over numbers and talking about this. And my biggest concern that I would like to mention with the council is I would like to see strict measures with this, but I'm not necessarily opposed to using some monies, not every year, but depending on how much excess, because some years there's not going to be excess money. But I do feel comfortable with having that $8 million, that it cannot dip below that in reserves. And then I also, this is going to be an ongoing conversation with the power folks. Like, absolutely, they need what they need to make sure we have a functioning city and everyone has power. Now, when I ran for this position, one of my main concerns was the King Clarion area. The folks up there complain about power outages repeatedly throughout the year. And so that was one of my first questions to the power folks. What about that? Before we start talking about taking money out, we need to make sure that every single part of our community has reliable power. And there is a robust plan in that area right now to fix that entire situation. And we're moving forward with that. And so we are seeing progress with that. And in terms of the city, with inflation at record high, we did not, it was a really challenging discussion and decision to make, especially with our neighbor Fruit Heights pulling out of our emergency services. It left us with a pretty big deficit. And so not raising taxes, we just felt like that would not, it would be wrong to raise taxes with such high inflation. And so looking at the budget, we have all this money, and moving money from one pot to the other, to me, it makes sense if there are protocols in place and if everything is transparent and in the open, and depending on what that money is used for. And so, obviously, there were decisions made in the past that I would absolutely disagree with. And I'm sitting up here to be responsible and to be responsible to you. And laws, I'll put it this way. I think what happened with Proposition 5, that was necessary. But now we're sitting here with this council, and I feel like we have a good track record of building that reserve fund. And I also feel like, well, Councilmember Blackham said, we have so many various expenses in the city, and I think good functioning proper government is not only open and transparent, but I think we also need to have the ability to pay for our expenses, and especially expenses that go back into the community. And there was discussion about getting reimbursements back, and I kind of looked it up, and some of the numbers I threw in, $25 a household, $50 a household in terms of the fire truck. But when we put money back in the fire truck or a park or roads or sidewalks, we really need to fix our sidewalks over here. That's going back into the city, and that's going back to help all of us residents. And so I am very conscientious of that. But I think bringing this up, I think it's wise and prudent. It's a different day today. We have different members on the council. We have no interest in having problems like the past. But we want to get this right, and we want to look at every tool we have. So.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember.
Sorry, I realize I
Go
talked
ahead.
before, but
No,
before
go
was
ahead,
a question.
go ahead.
I mean, and I'm conflicted on this because I agree with Councilmember Blackham on the ability to use some funds to be able to not have to raise taxes, and yet I'm reminded of the old story that I've used many times as I've taught that, you know, you let that camel's nose get out of the tent, and pretty soon he's pushed you out of the tent, and so, you know, there has, if this went forward, there has to be specific guidelines to be able to tie hands. And I don't know that I'm ready. I have not talked to the Power Commission, anybody. And so I don't know that I'm personally ready, you know, since I haven't done that and, you know, a little bit more. I don't know that I want to shut it down, but I would be amenable to tabling this for a while just to get a little more, you know, so I feel better prepared or better educated. You know, I'd be willing to make a motion to do that if other people don't have any more comments.
Okay, go ahead.
Questions?
Yes, you can have a question.
Did you have your light on to talk, or
Yeah, I'm good.
Dean? Would you be able to answer a question for me? And maybe it's asking you too much because to know the inner workings of other cities, but we've referenced Bountiful a lot in our discussions with the Power, and that they actually do, they transfer 10%, is that correct? Okay. So I guess one of the scenarios that I've been thinking about more and more is that we need to own whatever we're going to do. We need to call it what we're going to call it, which is, if we're going to say that the power company is owned by the citizens, and that part of owning our own power company is that then we can do things for the city that benefit the city, then we say that's what we're going to do. And I think that's one of the things they do, is they've owned it and said, we're going to transfer 10% every year, regardless, to the enterprise fund, is that good? Or the general fund. If they're like having a low year, then do they raise rates even still to meet that 10%? Does that make sense? I guess because they have to keep, like us, they have to keep that 8 million in.
I guess I don't know exactly how they do it.
Okay.
I know the city manager mentioned there are two approaches. approach of doing the same amount every year or doing exactions, taking pieces of the pie and taking it out and transferring it. Bountiful does 10%. Murray, the city corporation, does 8%. And they just build it into their budget every year. So they know that if there's a need in the power department, that becomes a fixed cost for them. So if there are needs on top of that, then I suspect they raise or lower rates based on knowing that that's the fixed element of the budget.
So,
Yeah, no, it does.
it seems like that almost seems like a trick to tax people more.
Well, and that's why I'm saying, like, I don't know that it's
not a trick
so much, because it actually is pretty upfront. It's like they're saying but they're counting on it, right? And they're using
and they're building their budgets to spend based upon it,
right,
which I think is wrong.
Okay, and that's but I think that's the discussion that I would like to have, is if that is wrong, because I think that's one of the things that we're looking at right now is rates. Thanks, Steen. You're awesome. Rates are going to increase. I mean, power is becoming more expensive. We're going to be possibly shutting down coal plants, or California is not going to be buying from us, as we got presented to, a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. And so, yeah, rates are going to increase. The way it looks, at least to the blind eye, that we're doing is basically we're going to say, hey, we're going to pull money out of this department, and then a year later we're going to raise rates. The optics of that look bad, because it's like, wait, why didn't you use some of that reserve to make it so our rates didn't go up so much? But as the mayor's presented, that the operating costs are different than the reserve costs. And so I think that this is a discussion that we need to have based off of the fact, are we going to set a policy where we say, as long as there's $8 million in there, the rest every year gets transferred over to the general fund? Or are we going to say we just leave it in there?
Yeah.
I think that for me, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is, the reason that the Kaysville City started the power company, I don't believe it was so that the citizens could have cheaper power. I believe, in my history of it, it was because people weren't coming in and providing power for citizens of Kaysville. They were saying, like, it doesn't make sense for us as a company, Rocky Mountain, to run power lines out to your house all the way in West Moondies, right? And so we started a power company. The citizens decided to start a power company so that they could control and make sure that all of the citizens got power. It was for the benefit of the citizens. And so, do we see the power company as part of our city, or do we see them as a separate entity? I think we should see them as part of our city and have them be benefiting the city. But at what point does it become taxation without representation? I think I agree with you, Perry, in the sense that you're saying, well, if you're going to charge me for something, raise my taxes so that it appears what you're going to do, what you're doing is out in the open.
I think it's important. Right now there's $1.2 million over the $8 million. So if you took, you say $1 million, and you wanted to give a rebate, say, to people, Melinda, how many homes in Kaysville, residents? About 8,500?
I think it's 8,900.
8,900. So you're talking about $110 a household.
Plus, isn't it commercial entities as well that?
I was just talking residents. So
that would be the problem.
And so you're talking, you're not talking much. And so I'm saying, even if you're talking, and this is I've thought, well, then don't raise the rates as much and use some of that excess to offset that. It's not much.
It's not much.
When you're looking by month to month, because, that $110 or something would fund my house for maybe a week and a half.
But I do think we need, I guess,
so I'm just saying, I'm just saying, you look at some of the levels. I don't know.
The policy needs to be in place though, so that everybody can see exactly, in my opinion, it needs to be a more strict policy. It can't just be, you can occasionally dip into this when you need it. I think that the policy needs to be written in place that it's like anything over that amount goes towards something. Like, I think that needs to be the policy rather than an arbitrary, every once in a while you can dip into this.
Well, I think that varies from year to year, and that's why I've always said that if we're going to use these excess funds, they should be for one-time purchases, because I think, as Brian could probably get up here and tell now that he's here, he could probably say that my budget changes year to year. There are some years that I have big major projects that are out there, and then there are other years that we don't have to do as many big projects as we are doing. And so, but as we're selling the kilowatt hours at 11.11 something cents, and for kilowatt hour, and we're accumulating and we're making a profit, there are probably some years Brian can say, yes, this year I brought in that same amount of money based on the sale of and because of that, and because of our operating budget, and because of the things that we did not have to do, we have an excess of money this year. And I think that's when it goes to the city manager, and it goes to Dean, and it goes to all those people, and that's when they come to us and they say, okay, this year it appears that we have a surplus in the power that we could put towards a general item of one-time purchase or something. Yeah, there was a mistake made when they hired 3 officers out of the power fund, because that's the gift that keeps on giving every year, and you have to count on it. And so there's no way to make up for that one other than every year through property taxes, or you take that much money from the power company every year. But if you can have a robust power company, which I think we're proven statistically, our power company is pretty solid. Yeah, there's things that need to be done. There's projects that have to be done. But from year to year, there's going to be different amounts of excess that comes from the profits there. And as a council and as a citizen of Kaysville, I want you to reinvest that into my city. I want you to reinvest that into my community. Now, one year it might mean that I've got to pay a portion of a fire truck because they can't get them here for 3 years, and if you don't buy it now, it's going to cost you $60,000, well, $121,000 more if you don't commit to it and buy it now, and we hold it. Or it may say one year, like Nate says, the sidewalks up here in the old part of town are tripping people, and for the cost of emergency services and somebody paying a doctor bill for hurting their back or whatever, the money that you take out of that power company would probably be well spent. But you have to look at it year to year. It's just another tool in that big picture of city budget that I think we need to be able to use, because I'll say it again, I have a seriously hard time telling somebody we're going to raise your taxes, but yes, we have a big reserve of money over here this year.
Can I add to that too? Just make a quick statement. So part of the reason why we're having this discussion was saving the city approximately $120,000, $150,000 by moving forward with the fire truck that we need, and with the new fire station going in on the west side. I also want to point out that earlier this year, as a council, we've combed through the city budget. We've combed through the finances. We were also able to save $150,000 this year on this budget with discretionary funds that we voted on. And so we've worked hard to try to save money and to rein it in and to be extremely prudent. And I think that's a part of going into this, of why we're talking about this, because I imagine it's probably a shock to some of you that we would even talk about this. And so that was the mentality going in. We're doing everything we can to save money, but we're trying to be prudent moving forward as well. So,
well, thank you for that. Abby, did you have a comment?
If that's okay.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, sorry. I want to get back into the weeds just a little bit here with some thoughts I've been having. I think there have been valid points with everyone all around here. There's definitely a lot of good ideas. And I just want to say, whether or not we raised taxes a lot in the past, I don't think can be proved as causation. It could be correlation, and I just don't think that right now, looking at the information that we have, maybe a deep dive later could prove causation. Great, but I don't think that we can prove causation just because we didn't used to raise taxes, because the cause could be maybe we didn't raise taxes for so long and now we're trying to play catch up. So I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that line of thinking. And I don't think we need to purvey the thought that just because we are maybe opposed to using this, that it means we want to raise taxes. I don't think anyone wants to raise taxes. I've never met anyone who wants to raise taxes. I certainly don't. As essentially a single income family with young kids at home, I have an understanding of the struggles that people are facing, especially with inflation. I went to the store the other day and 18 eggs was $6. I mean, that's obscene. It's getting to the point where it's more than meat. So I think all of us have that in our hearts. I also like to bring up what Councilmember Jackson said. We are seeing progress in the Power Fund. We are getting to a good place with our projects. But also, I still feel like a rate can, if it's done inappropriately, be a tax by another name. We still have the op center we need to work on, which we've talked about, which we've decided is a necessity. It's in our buildings project list. It's not like it's going away. And can someone remind me how much the cost is on that, Shane? Do you remember?
It was 23 million.
Something like that, yeah.
Which is a lot.
Right.
So I feel no pressure to move on this. We've had a lot of questions brought up. I think in the past, in the discussions on this, we've felt like we were under the gun, and I don't feel that way tonight. I don't feel like we need to say, yes, we're doing this tonight. I would rather answer more questions, and like Councilmember Oaks said, I would rather table it if that's where we're going. Sorry. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And okay, so I just wanted to, I appreciate the comments as well. This is why we've slowed this process down immensely, and we will continue to talk about it perhaps, or we'll have a decision tonight, I'm not sure. So, you know, I've been on the council I was on the council 2 years and then elected as mayor, so a couple of years. A couple of years ago, we decided to not raise taxes that much. We weren't going to capture the full amount that we could have through truth in taxation. So we took money from the general fund reserves, and we kind of offset and kind of plugged some money into the general budget. Then we had a situation with another city who decided that they didn't want to contract for us with us for some fire services, which kind of put another hole in our budget. And so to offset that, we again didn't want to really raise taxes or capture that, and so we took money from the general fund reserves to kind of plug that hole. So initially, these are the conversations that we've had, and we've tried to decide, okay, how can we be fiscally responsible? And so this money, this Prop 5 money, this enterprise fund transfer discussion was had, and that's why it was created, and that's why we've had the conversation. So, and I've been across the board as well as everyone else, because we want to do the right thing. We understand why this happened and why there was the impetus for not allowing the city to do this. And so I guess as I'm sitting here listening to everybody discuss this, on one hand, I see us using general fund reserves to fill in holes in the budget. And now we're not running out of general fund reserves. We still have a healthy balance. In fact, we heard tonight that we might even have too much money in there at present time. But we have some capital projects that we're trying to save for. So we're being fiscally responsible. We do have an op center that is in the distant future, and we have a fire station in the near future that we need to build on the west side. So we've got that discussion. But then as we turn over to power funds and those reserves, I guess I see a trend. I see a trend where we're taking from savings, and then we're potentially taking from savings again. Now, that's the purpose of a rainy day fund, right? We want to have those reserves in place. The thing that concerns me, and John did allude to it, we've had a lot of discussions with the power department and clean energy and the push from perhaps the state legislature, some individuals who want to save the coal mines, which then makes clean energy not as affordable for us, because right now we have a partner in California who will pay for it. And if the project gets delayed, then California is not in, and then it will raise our rates. It will cause our power rates to increase. And so to the point of having the discussion of, okay, so we're going to take money that we have excess, but now we're also going to increase the rates, seems like a way of taxing us without taxing us. And so I guess my point is, I would rather be transparent and tell people, look, yes, we're going to have to capture some additional taxes. That's the bottom line. In Kaysville, we made a decision years ago to be what we are today. We are a hometown. We don't have a huge commercial base. Every time we try to talk about a bigger commercial type of entity, people get very upset because they don't want Kaysville to change. We want it to be a hometown. We want it to be a community. When we talk about increasing housing and increasing density, people get very upset. That would increase our revenue base by doing that. So I guess what I'm saying is I would like us to own what we are here in Kaysville. Okay, we're a hometown. We're a community that likes what we like, but I think that we also are a community that wants to know exactly what we're getting. And so in these discussions, and I'm not really, I guess I'm just trying to be sensitive to the fact that this was a ballot initiative, which is different than other cities. Yes, other cities transfer funds and they do it properly, and we could too. We could. It was a ballot initiative, which we've been very sensitive to ballot initiatives. Fiber didn't pass, right? It was a very slim margin, and we've had council members, especially, Councilmember Blackham, and those of us who were on the council before this new council, that said, yeah, we want the community to vote on this, and then we've been very, very vigilant in terms of making sure that we are not spending a dime of city money to do a fiber to the home project, and because it was on the ballot. And so I think it's kind of hard to have a conversation where we completely support a ballot initiative, and then maybe we don't so much because times have changed. Now, there are some very valid reasons why times have changed over the last 9 years. So I guess I just really want us to slow down and make the decision. So tonight we have an item on the agenda to perhaps change to update our ordinance regarding this. And basically, just to tell you what the change would be, it's all operating revenues of the Kaysville Electric Utility Enterprise Fund should be used to benefit the city. Preference may be given to restrict expenditures solely to the direct operations of the Kaysville Power Department. The Kaysville Electric Utility Enterprise Fund shall maintain cash reserves as established by the governing body. Operating revenues above operation expenditures and cash reserves may be redistributed to other city needs that encourage the health, safety, and welfare of the city. So that's what we have on the agenda tonight, and we need to make a decision on it. So that being said, does someone want to make a motion? Okay, Perry, go ahead.
No, let me, hold on. The joy of getting old and having cataracts. No, I would like to make a motion that we table action item D, an ordinance amending Kaysville City Ordinance 4-2-7, electric revenues and rates regarding electric fund transfers to a future date.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Councilmember Adams. Sorry, discussion, comments. We can have comments.
I was just wondering if we have an idea of when we would be tabling. I've never loved tabling especially because people show up for action items, and sometimes it can appear to be a way of kicking it down to thin the crowd. So, I guess my question would be if there's a way to say how long you plan to table it for.
Can I make an addendum to the motion that we table it for 3 months?
For 3 minutes, putting that as a decision
is that too late?
That would get really, if we were going to do a public hearing, that's getting really tight, isn't it? Because we have to have a tentative budget first.
Oh, sorry. I'd be happy to go too. I just don't, I'm not comfortable tonight.
Okay. Well, then, Councilmember Adams, are you wanting to suggest a substitute motion?
I thought there was a reason maybe why I just don't know. I'd like to have a date in mind.
Yeah,
I guess 2 months?
2 months.
Do you feel comfortable seconding that?
Yeah.
To delay the decision for 2 months, so putting this on a February agenda?
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel better about that.
Okay, so discussion?
And my discussion is obviously you can tell by my discussion, I'm a proponent of being able to use it because I think it's all of our money and it's all one big budget. And if it takes 2 months to either bring the confidence of my other council members that they would be willing to to do it too. And like I said, this ordinance does not make it automatic. All it does is allows us to have the ability to do it. So yeah, I'm okay with waiting if it would help any of my other council members make a decision.
And my direction too would be what I'd like to see. You know, my biggest concern this entire time was going against the trust of those who worked so hard to do Prop 5. And if you listen to like previous council minutes, you would hear that I've said like, that's my biggest concern is I've wanted to come together with the group that worked so hard to do Prop 5 and have us all be in agreement of what we're doing. And, you know, so for me, one of the things that's going to be very important over the next 2 months prior to this is that we come together and we make a one-pager or something that discusses everything, the history behind Prop 5, why it was written, those types of things, and then a discussion about why we're looking at this as well on that. And that gives us a chance as a council, whether it be through Facebook or just person to person, to be able to present that one pager to as many people in the community as possible. And if people say, yeah, I'd rather you put this on a ballot so we can vote on it, maybe that's the route we go. Or if people say, you know, I'd rather you guys go buy a fire truck with that money, then that's where we hear. You know, I want to hear what everybody has to say. And to date, we haven't heard enough from everybody. And I think, you know, the gentleman with
be careful what you wish ask for.
No, I love it. I love it. But like, I think that's really important that you know that we work for you. And so our goal is to find out what everybody in the city thinks and also present. Does that make sense? The one pager?
Yeah.
That's what I want to see.
Councilmember, and what I like seeing, you know, when I'm used in making decisions, what are the COAs? I mean, what are the pros and cons? You're making decisions, and there are pros and cons to whatever decision you make in life. Mm-hmm. And with regards to this, we've heard from residents. They've all been the cons, you know, and I believe there are pros, and I'd like to see them laid out, you know, that we're able to see those all together, be deliberative on them and what we agree or disagree with. And, you know, if I was asking folks, you know, that were going to send us a note, what are your pros and your cons? What would you see as a benefit of this? As the mayor was reading the ordinance, I'm mostly in agreement. And yet, as she's reading it, I go, I don't think it's restrictive enough. I think because it's not maybe this council, but what about 2 councils from now? You know, how do you, and I guess they could change the ordinance anyways, it doesn't matter, but how do you tie your hands as best as possible? And right now, and as I said earlier during the work session, I believe the pendulum has potentially gone too far. And I understand how that happens.
And I think the way that you get, the way that you help prevent future councils from changing a policy is by writing a really good policy that is hard not to agree with. And I think that's what we're looking, or a really good ordinance, and that takes time. You can't be doing it on the fly. And this is too important, especially where it was on the ballot, to not give it a lot of time and a lot of you know, and Nick wrote a great ordinance. I mean, well done, John Hancock. But it's just, you know, we want to fine tune it. So I'm voting. I vote yay.
Well, did we have everyone else's comments?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I agree with that completely because, you know, it's kind of, it's my first year serving. It's challenging because a week ago I was yes, and then a few days no after some of the issues. And I feel like I want more information as well and really dive in. And I agree too, like I kind of want an objective viewpoints from the folks that have experience as of today, real life, what that looks like and where we can move and whatnot. But very conscientious of that. The reason why I ran for this is because I was concerned about how we spent money in our city. And I want to be fiscally responsible, but have better infrastructure as well. And so I would love the opportunity to talk to you folks more one-on-one in the next few weeks and get just more in-depth understanding, look at the data and things like that. So, yeah.
Okay.
His calendar's wide open on the 25th.
Okay. We ready to vote? Okay, Councilmember Adams.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. That passes unanimously. Okay, we will move on to action item B now. Rezone of .34 acres of property at 97 East Crestwood Road from R18 to R16. Brian Carling. I'll turn the time over to Melinda. Our monitors are not working, so, yeah. Go ahead, Melinda.
Monica?
Did I call you Monica?
Go
Sorry.
ahead, Bob.
Bob, yeah.
Thanks again for coming, everybody.
All right. I think we're back in the right spot.
Especially Nathan Rich. Notice how he left. Finally. Get out of here.
Okay. This discussion allowed me to do a little bit of math on this rezone request. The applicant is Brian Carling. He is here tonight, and if the council has questions for him, he can address those. The property is located at 97 East Crestwood. It is a .34 acre lot, and it's just over 14, well, it's not just over, it's 14,810 square feet. Right now, there's one single family dwelling on the lot. It's zoned R18. The request is to go to R16. That would allow a second lot to be built on, or a second lot through a subdivision. This is just an aerial shot of the property. You can see the home is shifted to the north end of the property, and that south portion of the property that fronts Crestwood would be the location that a second home could be built on. This is a zoning map of the area. It shows that nearly everything in the area is the R18, the 8,000 square foot lot minimum. There's general commercial in the vicinity, some RM, and then across the street is that public use. Taking a look at the future land use map that's in our 2020 general plan, it does show the property is to be utilized in a single family residential use. So R16 is still considered single family, and therefore the request to go from R18 to R16 does fall within the future land use map as depicted. One of the things I like to help the council and the public understand anytime we talk about a rezone is the differences between those two zones. The uses between R18 and R16 are essentially the same, but there is a difference between the lot sizes. Of course, the R16 is a little bit smaller than the R18. Interestingly, the R16 is the smallest single-family lot zone that we have in our code. And as it is zoned right now, they would only be allowed to have one single-family dwelling. Again, the rezone would allow up to 2. There is a little bit of a difference between the minimum lot width, and that's how you are able to get those smaller lots. So it would go from 60 to 55 feet. The front setback is the same. The side setback is 8 feet in the R18, and then the R16 it's at 5 feet. The rear setback is the same, and the maximum building height is the same. The applicant did submit a concept of what could be done with the property, so it shows a building envelope there on the south part if it were to be subdivided. We did have a public hearing on this item at the November 10th Planning Commission meeting. We did not receive any public comments during the meeting, and we did not receive any prior to the meeting. Sometimes we do receive emails. We didn't receive anything on this. The Planning Commission voted 5-0 to recommend approval of the zone change request to the City Council. We are recommending the same, and I believe if this rezone is to be approved, this would be the first R16 zoning to take place within the city. So the math that I did on that, and it's 8,920 dwelling units that are in the city. So if this were to pass, that would make 2 lots out of those 8,920 that would be zoned R16, and that's 0.0002% of the single family homes in Kaysville. So given the location.
You were bored, huh?
Just testing my math skills. Given the location, again, on the corner there, I think it's a great use. This is an infill development project that we may start to see more of those as people maybe don't want to take care of larger lots. We have seen quite a few of these over the years with the flag lot subdivisions that the state essentially required us to allow quite a few years ago. So this is kind of another element of how infill development can come in. I do think that this would be again, next year as we report back to the state on our moderate income housing, I think this would be a nice thing to report back, that it doesn't detrimentally impact the existing area of the neighborhood. It's single family, it'll stay single family, but we are adding another opportunity, another housing opportunity for someone to come into the community. So with that, I will just turn the time over to the council for any questions, and again, the applicant's here to answer any questions you may have for him.
Thank you very much, Brian. Are you here? Yes, will you come up for us, please? Just state your name, and then we'll see if anyone has a question for you.
My name is Brian Carling. I live down in the very south end of Kaysville on the Farmington-Kaysville border. I think there was one mistake. This would not be the first R16 rezone. There was another one east by northeast, another home, which was a real jigsaw puzzle lot split. We're using Ensign Engineering to try to make this as clean as possible. And to make it clean as possible, a little bit of the garage would have to be cut off. So.
Cut off, I mean, just like a shorter garage. I mean,
yes, if you look, like, can you pull up the,
can't get a Suburban in there?
Yeah.
So.
You want to see the aerial, or?
Either one, like right there. If you see that the house that is in the northeast corner, it's non-compliant, non-conforming, and it was before any of us were born. This is a 98-year-old home. That was there on the old cemetery road, and I believe that was before ever the Fairfield idea came about. So this is a very old home. The garage that is to the very west, it's a large garage, it's cinder block, but would be very expensive to replace. So the idea is my son is gonna live in this home. He just lives on 2nd North, so he's used to both busy streets.
He's going to live in the new home?
He's living in another home. He is working to purchase this one from me.
Okay.
So the goal is to cut off whatever is necessary, 2, 3, 4 feet, to meet the guidelines on setbacks, so that we don't have to rebuild that. It's quite a large garage.
Yeah, looks like.
So you'd cut off a couple feet here.
Yes, to make sure that the lot line is clean. I don't think I served on the planning commission many years ago. I always hated the idea of all these really funky lot lines. This is, I think, the most pleasing to the eye. It keeps the very large tree on the southeast corner. That's a great big catalpa tree. I've loved that tree. This used to be a very beautiful English garden by Mrs. Baker that lived here.
I remember that.
Last year. My wife has promised to do her best on that, but the idea is to build a very nice home. I'm not wealthy, but to have a very nice home, and I would want to have some kind of control over what would go into the new lot to the very south. But it does lend itself to be new, and we think there would be a high demand for something that would be so close to all of the city amenities. The setbacks, we wanted to have a 40-foot footprint. Most homes 40 feet gives a very nice footprint. The house just to the west is only 30 feet wide on a PRUD. They have really packed in those homes. I could have applied for a multifamily, which would, according to the square footage when we bought it, which was 0.37, we did a survey and we found out because of all of the other encroaching surveys done grandfathered before ours, it's not 0.37 for which we bought, which was over 16,000 square feet. It is 0.34. That's, I verified it, I paid for it. Well, that's what I know going forward. So that's the necessity for the rezone. And that's the single motivator behind the rezone, is to go the R16, is to try to keep what's there, but comply and conform going forward.
Will the garage be off of Fairfield or Crestwood, or the driveway?
The driveway is that north gravel road. If it's annoying, it would be off of Fairfield.
Fair.
The home, my guess is, would be on the very southwest corner on Crestwood, which is way less busy than Fairfield.
Yeah.
The frontage would be considered off of Fairfield to hit the city's requirements on the width or setbacks.
Is your plan to rent this house or to sell it?
I am not interested in being a landlord.
Okay.
I don't know if I have enough money with the costs and the real estate and the market change to build a spec home, but I have two sons looking for homes.
Oh, great.
Three
Okay.
total.
Our son lives just 2 houses down, so they'll be neighbors. That'd
And
be
you
great.
have sons that'd be happy to live next to each other?
Well, they don't know that yet, but
Sorry. One question, so, no, you answered it. Never mind. I'm good.
Anyone else have questions? Councilmember Jackson.
Yeah, just one quick question. So taking a few feet off that garage, what is that, like how long is that garage and will that still keep the garage usable?
oh yes, it has, it's 24 feet wide and I think it's 36 north
Okay,
and south.
okay.
So there's a shop on the south end,
how
which
would
is a
that be?
12-foot wide
Almost as
shop.
big as the house.
He only gets an 8-foot wide shop. Poor Jason, my son. We think it works. We'll have the Ensign Engineering help us with the design, making sure that the cinder block walls are reinforced before we do that.
Okay, that's great.
That's always
I was just
dependent
looking,
upon your decision.
yeah, I was just looking forward to future homeowners and didn't want to, yeah, create an unfunctional garage necessarily.
Right, and it's kind,
Yeah.
the whole thing is kind of an eyesore. It's 98 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
The garage is probably not that old, but it needs work.
Right.
And it's been vacant for a long time already.
yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you, Brian. All right, seeing no questions, does someone make a motion? Okay,
I'll make a
Councilmember Jackson.
motion. Action item, I guess it was A, but now B. Rezone of .34 acre property at 97 East Crestwood Road from R18, single-family residential, to R16, single-family residential.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any comments? No, we don't have anyone signed up to speak to this, so we will go to Councilmember Blackham.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. Good luck. Thank you. Okay, we are on action item C, which is now preliminary plat approval for Manor Estate subdivision located at 67 North Angel Street for Phil Holland. Is Phil here? Or Phil is not here.
Wow.
Melinda.
Doesn't even bother to show up.
Are you
Phil.
representing Phil?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Phil,
I'm just kidding.
I'll do my best.
Okay.
What's
okay.
your relation
What's your
to Phil?
name?
Huh?
What's your relation to Phil?
I work with Phil.
Oh, okay.
So he just doesn't like me to show up at the meetings, because I look nice to them.
Yeah. He doesn't like to be upstage. That's true.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, Melinda.
How expensive are your shoes is the question.
Well, he works for Phil.
Right,
Work for
right.
him, so based
Right.
on that, I think Truck's shoes might be a
A
little
little
less
less.
expensive. All right, so we are here to talk about the property that was recently rezoned at 67 North Angel Street. has been used, it's been a large agricultural lot with one single-family home on that. It's zoned R114 now, and the subdivision request that's coming in, I think, is showing, well, here's an aerial shot of the property over there at Bonneville Lane and Angel Street. The subdivision is, it's, how many lots was it? 11. Okay, yeah. So 11 lots. They are proposing that this cul-de-sac would be a public street that would be stubbed for a future connection to the property to the north when and if that develops. This again was at the November 10th Planning Commission meeting. The Planning Commission voted 5-0 to recommend approval of the preliminary plat subdivision. They did have a couple of conditions that they added to the plat approval, which was adding a note to that north end of the stub cul-de-sac there to show that it was going to be a future road connection to the north, and then adding notation that the sidewalk will be added to Angel Street where it does not exist now. So staff is recommending that the City Council approve the preliminary plat based with the conditions recommended by the Planning Commission. And Trek is here this evening if you have any more questions for him.
Come on down. You showed up, and let's see what we can do to you. Okay. Please state your name.
Trek Loveridge.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course.
Hey,
Council.
Trek, do you know on that parcel that's the kind of goofy strip that's going down?
Strip right
yeah,
there.
has there been any decision on that? I mean, not like it's necessarily our place to decide what you guys do with that, but I think that it's just, that was one of the questions by two of the people that showed up.
Totally. Well, we want to separate it in its own parcel, and we've been talking with both of the adjacent homeowners and trying to talk with them to figure out what they would like to do, because it's about, I don't know, 15 to 20 feet in width, and so we're in talks with if one wants to purchase it, or if they want to split it. So we're not planning to have it be a weird little flag lot scenario where owner of lot number 8 can just go in between the houses. That's just a weird scenario for everyone involved. So yeah, right up there is perfect. It shows parcel A, and then the rest is parcel B. So
got it.
If that helps.
That does help a lot. Yep. Thanks. I didn't see that.
That opens a question for me then, because we don't like having unowned parcels, slivers in subdivisions. So I would think it would have to belong to lot 7. If you can't come to an agreement with the adjoining neighbors, it doesn't make sense that we would just leave a parcel of land. We can't. We wouldn't do that anyway, would we? That you can't use. So I guess I would have to say that if the neighbors don't buy it, it has to become part of lot 7.
Well, yeah, worst case scenario, that is what happens. But, you know, me and Phil, we've talked about it, and we think better use would come from the adjacent.
I don't disagree with you as far as the use, but I don't want to approve a plat without some sort of contingency that if they don't purchase it, it becomes part of lot 7, because the city doesn't want to leave these little parcels next to their subdivisions. That's why we do subdivisions, to get rid of these little parcels.
Yeah. Well, we could work with Melinda and the city staff more on that and come to some agreement if that doesn't happen. And we can see where we're at when we're in final engineering and all of that to see if we have came to an agreement.
And then I have one other question for Melinda. Is generally these bold subdivisions, I mean, they're there, you see them, they're obvious what they're doing, and it's obvious that they will extend when the road extends, but are we going to take money right now to put in escrow or something so that in the future when that other land does develop and they have to go back in and remove those curbs and re-pour them, that the adjacent homeowners don't have to pay for it? Because usually they say it's not in our right-of-way, it's in the city right-of-way, because usually most of it is.
So to answer your first question, if you wanted to include that a condition that if parcel A doesn't end up being sold to either property owners, it becomes part
Lot
of
seven.
that lot 7, we can certainly include
Sure,
that
make
condition.
that part of the motion.
Yeah.
Yeah. To answer your second question, we had not discussed that or contemplated that. And in my experience, you know, I think that most homeowners would just leave that curb cut out of that bulb out on the.
Well, the reason I say that is because the sidewalk would end up having to go straight, so they come out. When it comes a continuous street, usually you take out those portions of the curb, you continue the sidewalk straight on, and it meets it's usually in the right-of-way of the city, and there's no money for that, and so you try to go to the adjacent homeowners, and technically it's not really in their property. So somehow, somebody has to pay for that, taking out that curb, extending it straight, and adjoining the adjacent property. Now, if that's something we put on to the next landowner that wants to develop, okay, I guess that's how you do it, but otherwise I don't want the city to be held to have to tear that out and redo that when the adjacent property subdivides.
Seems to me like that should fall on the new landowner, the new folks who are developing have to do any improvements to the.
How does that?
I think Dexter and I, city engineer, spoke about this, Mr. Fisher, and I believe it wasn't on this development, but another one. I believe there's bond provisions for that, and I believe we hold a bond on that. I could be wrong, but I think Mr. Fisher and I have spoken about that on a number of other developments and how we would handle that.
So who holds the bond, though?
City.
The city does? Against which property?
We hold the bond to eventually remove that, that temporary turnaround.
Okay.
So I guess I would have to include that also in my motion, that they escrow for that amount of removing that and extending those curbs in the future, so unless there's other questions, I could probably make a motion.
Any other questions, council? No? Okay, go for it.
Okay, I would make a motion that we accept the preliminary plat for Manor Estate subdivision located at 67 North Angel, with the stipulation that that parcel A be included at lot 7 if the adjacent homeowners do not purchase it, whether they split it or one buys it, I don't care. But I don't want it to be left. And then also that there is money put into escrow to remove that temporary bulb and extend that curb straight and sidewalk to the property line.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Comments? Nope. All right. Councilmember Oaks.
Aye.
Councilmember Jackson?
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, Chuck.
I'm better than Phil. Let's
Yeah,
put it on
clear, that's on
It's
the,
now on the record.
I think he's listening right now.
I'm
That's
sure he
on
is.
the minutes.
He was too busy to show up, but
And
we
you
get-
won't
we
have
got
a job
it.
tomorrow.
for
Yeah,
sure on
yeah.
the minutes. Thanks.
Good job. Okay. All right, preliminary plat approval for Johnson Farms subdivision located at 602 South Angel Street. Melinda?
All right. This was another rezone that just happened within the last few months. It was previously used as agricultural land, and then it was rezoned to R114 with a PRUD overlay. The property there, as we said, it's on Angel Street, 602 South. There is a large existing home on the property right now that would need to be demolished to accommodate the subdivision. They are proposing 4 lots, and again, that PRUD, so that would be a private drive, a private road with the hammerhead turnaround for public safety. The Planning Commission discussed this at the November 10th meeting and also had a 5-0 vote. They included the 8 conditions that are on the screen before you. I also outlined this in the staff report. Items number 7 and 8, we do not traditionally require on subdivision plats. So it is up to the council's discretion as to whether or not you want to include those as items with the approval. You can, you don't have to, but depicting the turn radii from Angel Street and showing the public improvements outside of the subdivision just isn't something we traditionally require. So our recommendation based on that is that you approve the preliminary plat subdivision based on the conditions 1 through 6. I will turn back to that slide that has 1 through 8. So if you want to include all 8 items in your motion, we can do that. And we do have the applicant here with us this evening. So Mr. Johnson is here if we would like to.
I'm not sure I understand what 7 and 8 really mean.
What, do they, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, are they going to, are you going to?
I was going to, but unless we have more questions
Sorry.
for Melinda, do we?
Oh, whoever can answer it.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right. Would you like to come up? Not whoever's coming. Okay, thank you.
The Planning Commission, I think, got a little bit into the weeds with some of their discussion. And some of this would be included in the construction drawings that we require after final plat is approved and before we go and record the plat. So I think perhaps some of their concern with number 7, the turn radii, which that's where when you turn onto a street, the curb has a radius to it. And so I think their thought with that was that it is including a dedication of right-of-way, but it's a private drive, and so the right-of-way already exists.
Isn't there a ditch there?
The turn radius is something that would be constructed and included in the construction drawings, but it's just not something we traditionally include on a subdivision plat.
Yeah, I listened to it and it seemed a little bit too much like they were trying to dictate problems that might happen from it being a busy Angel Street, but it also seemed like common sense would dictate that you guys would want to do it the right way regardless. Like, do you have any issues with 7 and 8?
I think it's a little overkill on 7 and 8, but this would be done the same way that the other PRUDs have been done on Angel Street.
Okay.
I mean, there's 4 or 5 of them that are down there that have a private drive, and we do exactly the same thing that's been done.
Yeah, I know.
I will just remind council, I was told that we need to make sure if we have side discussions that we don't have them. So did you have something that you guys wanted to share, Mike and Harry, a question or
He was just
comment?
asking me about the improvements on Angel Street, and I said with the subdivision, they're required to put the improvements along Angel Street.
Okay,
Just
good.
that's the city standards.
Okay.
They already exist, though.
Yeah, that's what I say. If
you know,
you
so-
aerial photo, they're already there.
Yeah, they'll do some curb cuts, obviously, and they may have to replace some sections of the sidewalk as they come in to do their private drive, but we don't, the subdivision plat is to show the new lots that are being created. So showing public improvements that are outside the boundaries of the subdivision plat just doesn't make sense to me. But I think the concern was that there isn't sidewalk all the way along the places, along both sides of the street on Angel Street. And so I think they were just trying to make sure that the sidewalk is there or gets.
As I recall, there was a question on which side of the street it was on, and the council was assured them that it was in front of.
It is, yeah, it does exist right now.
So,
Mayor, if I could also add, item 8 is a little bit just unnecessary in that the subdivision plat is a legal document that the city's going to file eventually with the county that's going to establish like property boundaries and ownership.
Right.
And items on a plat outside of the boundary of the area is really it doesn't govern anything. It doesn't
Right.
dictate anything. You could draw a little picture of the cat in the hat or something there and have the same legal effect.
Right.
Can we make a motion that they actually do draw a cat in the
cat in the
hat
hat.
on the plat? Are you guys okay with that? Okay. I'll
I've
make a
served
motion
on
if you want.
planning commission, and I'm not sure where some of the detailed requirements came from. But anyway, go ahead.
I'll make a motion, if everybody's okay, I'll make a motion that
Yes.
we approve the preliminary plat for Johnson Farm subdivision as stated, with the exception of 7 and 8, removing 7 and 8 from the list. And also thank the Johnson family for being so awesome.
And having patience.
Yes.
Yeah, I second that.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any comments, council?
I have a comment. I loved
Yes,
what
Councilmember
you
Jackson.
had planned before, and I love this, so.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Thank you for your comment. All right, Councilmember Oaks.
Aye.
Councilmember Jackson.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Good luck with your project. Thanks for all your hard work, Johnsons.
What is a radii?
Okay. We are now moving on to our work item. An ordinance amending, discussion regarding changes to the Personnel Policies and Procedures Manual. And I will turn the time over to Shane. I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson, sorry. If you guys want to have a separate conversation after council, you are invited to do that, but thank you. Okay. All right.
Thanks,
Shane.
Mayor. Annually, we try to update our Personnel Policy and Procedures Manual, and as I mentioned in my staff report, most of the changes there to this document were adapting to changing laws. I hope that's not too overwhelming. A lot of the changes were to grammar and similar changes to that. But we wanted to present this to you, and we invited our human resource specialist, Kim, to be with us tonight. And this has been a very much a team effort. Dean and Levi have also been very involved in
This was
hung out with us.
painful.
It is painful. I apologize. I know. I don't know another way to do it. I'm hoping that the more that we do this, the less we'll have to do it, and in the future. But like some of the changes we made that we'll never have to do again. But we're here for questions. And of course, this is just a work item, as you know.
I do have a question on number 12. It says the city shall attempt to fill all vacant positions with qualified applicants from its existing workforce. This does not mean that we have to do that, right? It just means that we're going to try to infill, promote from within kind of thing?
Yes.
Okay.
And maybe just a nod to that, this is the document we give our employees when they arrive, and
Right.
we do make every effort to promote from within, but certainly don't tie our hands in doing so.
Okay. All right. Council, do we have any other additional questions?
Yeah, page 11.
Yes.
The add language for gender and sexual orientation. I think that's probably a little overkill. I think sex can kind of encompass all of that. Does that really
Religion,
need to be
sex, age, you mean?
specifically spelled out?
So you're suggesting maybe we don't include religion or age in that?
No, it says add language for gender and sexual orientation, religious, sex, age.
Oh,
and
right,
change
right,
it
right,
to
that
religion, sex, and then in parentheses, including gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, comma, age. And I was curious if is that really necessary? Because, religion or age, you can put parentheses for all of those. And I just think it covers its bases.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I think my understanding was that is to match the state requirements.
And that's what the state requirement has? Okay.
Wow.
Right.
I better not say anything since I'm on the record.
Feel free, speak freely, Perry.
Pathetic.
Has there been any negative feedback from any employees?
Most of these we just presented and they just said, great, I don't care about grammar or anything like that. But some of them we've discussed extensively and of course feel like we've gotten consensus from the different departments and some of those things. So.
Yeah, I was just a little worried because specific reference to gender identity or whatnot, nothing against folks who would fall into that category. It's just, does that open the Pandora's box to lawsuits, discrimination due to accidental?
I actually think it does the opposite. I think the reason why the state did it was to accommodate folks that may feel like they weren't included in what we did have.
Okay.
And then we were opening ourselves up to liability that way.
Okay.
If any of you three have anything to add,
We're
please
taking
feel
it out of
free.
context,
That's
too.
been our conversation.
And I think part of the problem is we're seeing it out of context that it's in, and.
We are definitely subject to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll stop too.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
So are most of these changes based upon just general updates that were needed because we had to, okay, got it.
Does that mean that Mike is no longer an on-call firefighter, that he's going to be called a part-time firefighter?
I'm a
Are
volunteer.
you okay with that?
He's a volunteer.
I'm 100% volunteer.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? No? Okay.
Thanks for doing this.
It
So
was
we
a
need-
lot of work, Mayor. Thank you for.
It was a lot of work.
Councilmember Adams for saying that. Levi did a ton, and Dean, I'm sure you did a ton too, but I know that. Kim
Cleaning
and
it
Levi
up,
did
thank you.
A ton of work, so thank you.
All right, so we would be
Dean's
looking
becoming a
for,
good delegator, a deledeener.
so this is a work item, so we'd look for a motion to maybe move it to an action item. Does someone want
Yeah,
to do that?
I'll make a motion that we move work item A, discussion regarding changes to personnel, policies, and procedures manual to an action item.
Okay.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any comments? No? Okay. Councilmember Jackson.
Aye.
Councilmember Hunt.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. Thank you so much. Councilmember reports. Does anyone have any?
Don't drink that. You're going to be up all night.
No, I did it, but I can do it again. I thought I did, but okay. Okay, so, Council, I just wanted to make sure, I know I mentioned this briefly at the beginning, but we want to thank our Kaysville City employee, Mindy Edstrom, maybe she's listening, for all of the work that she's done on Kaysville Gives. Didn't I mention? Okay, I might have. Did
I didn't. I can't.
Just, it was her baby project 6 years ago. She continues to carry it forward, and all of the other volunteers as well, including city staff here in the admin building. They were able to gather presents and gifts and receive them, and so just a really huge, gargantuan effort,
a big
and we're
effort.
so grateful for it.
But, I think it takes somebody, it's a big effort and I know you put a ton into it and everything. It's just if somebody didn't head it like Mindy, I'm not sure it would get done like it gets done. And I just want to make sure that people thank her and know it's her and give her the.
I will also give a shout out to her department director, because the department takes a little bit of time to be able to devote it to that too, because Mindy does spend some time on it, and we appreciate that community development for lending her for that effort. Okay, anyone else?
Mayor?
Yes.
If I may, I have gotten to be on it's a really long name. It's the Janet Quinney Lawson, it's at Utah State, the Institute for Land, Water, and Air, and I'm a huge believer that the most important things happen at the city level. So if anyone's watching, we just released the report to the governor on the 4th, I think, maybe it was the 1st, earlier this month. And so if anyone's watching, which you're probably not still, but check out, just Google Utah State and then ILWA, because the report has tons of information on the drought, the Great Salt Lake, wildfires, our land, water, and air issues, and I think everyone becoming more educated can be helpful, so that's my report.
Awesome.
Thank you.
What drought?
Councilmember Jackson.
And then just to remind everyone, Saturday, there's a special opportunity here in our city at the Kaysville City Cemetery, Wreaths Across America. We have a local Nancy Tippett who's in charge of this, and volunteers are going to place about 150 or so wreaths on veterans' graves. It's open to the public to volunteer, so 10 a.m. is the start time. So,
Thank you for mentioning that. Anyone else? No? Okay, Shane.
Mayor, a couple of things real fast. Mike, Councilmember Blackham just mentioned that the mayor was very instrumental in the Kaysville Give. She's not going to tell you that, but she was down there every second. I didn't even see her for a whole week, and that was weird. So thanks, Mayor, for being supportive of that effort. Mayor and Councilmember Adams and I, at least, were down at the UAMPS meeting on Wednesday, and it was mostly a tribute to Mr. Doug Hunter, who's been the UAMPS director for 43 years, so a very long time. He's stepping away, and obviously a much-deserved retirement.
He's been the director that
and a
long?
lot of that was about that. So props to Doug. And then we did receive the RFPs back on the old library, and we are very excited to have 2 come and present to you at the probably our February meeting. We're going to give them some time to prepare, but that's our plan, is to invite them to come. And I'm really excited to have you see those and to talk about that and see what we can do next year.
So Shane, multiple RFPs, I mean, how does the process work then to select?
We actually probably got 5, was it 5 or 6? 6?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, six responses, but I think only 2 of them really met the true, some were just
They're
saying,
really
hey, if you wanna
qualified,
do
yeah.
something here, I
2
can
were
help you.
compliant.
But 2 of them really met the standard of what we were looking for in a private partner. It's not a PPP, but in a private entity stepping up and helping us with this library situation. So we're happy to share those with you if you're interested in the meantime, just to take a look at their proposals.
No, I guess my question was, so if you have 2 that really qualify, I mean, will both be able to use it, or we'll get down to 1?
So what we would do is we would bring them in, they would present their proposal, you would have an opportunity to have answered questions, and then probably what we would do is discuss, since it would likely entail the purchase or sale of real estate, we would have a discussion in closed session to see which individual firm or group of response or which proposal we wanted to go with.
What we would normally do is that the committee would probably just propose someone, and they would say, here is a recommendation from Cole's department or whomever. Mm-hmm. But in this case, this is such a important decision with the council. It's probably just needs to make it.
So in a sense, give both of them an opportunity. Okay,
exactly.
I agree.
And
okay, thanks.
To that point, since there's so many of our public or residents are interested in this, do we need to have like a public, like post it or anything to get input, a time period to get input? Okay.
Yeah.
So just on that night. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and, with an RFP process, we have to provide confidentiality measures, et cetera. So, yeah, they'll definitely be able to come and listen.
Yeah, there could
For
be
sure.
elements of the proposal that would be
proprietary,
or protected.
Right. Usually, yeah.
Right. And so we could redact that, but post the rest of what is not, and put that in the public packet so that anyone could look at that.
We are excited, though, and we do appreciate very much the submissions and the interest from the community. So we're excited. Thank you.
That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, motion to adjourn?
I so motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for being here. Awesome work.
Thank you so much.